This is, of course, the official podcast of the International Power Rock Combo, motherfucking Ruckus, the Rad in Colorado, and certainly the Rad in Ineradicable. I'm your host, Aaron Howell. Got Gordo in the booth.
Dig it out.
How you doing, Gordo?
Well, I'm well. How are you?
I am also well. Thank you
right.
for being here today, man.
Yeah,
I'm glad you're here.
Oh, God.
Thank you very much to YOLO Rum for handling our live stream today. Wiggins is in the house, making it go down. Thanks for being here, Wiggins. Appreciate you, dude. And then also, big shout out at the very top of the show goes to our patrons. Fucking love you guys. All the people who back us via a small monthly contribution at patreon.com/MFRuckus. Our patrons get access to exclusive content, behind the scenes stuff, all the gossip and drama you can handle. Pretty much the band feed, get access to all that stuff. And yeah, in exchange, we try and hook them up as much as we can we try and hook them up with as much as we can, like VIP parties with beer and food and tickets to shows and things like that. And yeah, man, it goes a really long way. It helps us to keep the podcast going, to keep the YouTube channel going, and keep the comic going. And, of course, the most important thing, making rock and roll records with our friends.
Do you ever have any contests on there to see, like, if Patreon viewers or subscribers can actually get some kind of a riff to you faster than someone in your band?
That's actually a really good idea. So I did have this idea, and if I get enough interest in it, we'll do it. But I pitched it to the guys, and they didn't care for it. So let me run this by you and see what you think. And let me run this by you.
Yeah.
I had this idea to, because we don't get together and have like rehearsal every week since Tony lives in Chicago.
Sure.
And everybody's pretty much recording at home now. So we're really only getting together when we plan something or when we have a gig.
Sure.
So I was like, we need to keep the contact thing together, and we should figure out a way we can use this, great studio here at the Nug Nation to help build another piece of content. So I'm like, what if we have the demo a week challenge, which is where we, Tony sends us a riff and we pass it around on GarageBand. We share the project and we all work on it. And then the challenge is to have a new demo every week. And then what we could do is do like a Google Hangout thing where we go on and as a group, we listen to the demo and we kind of like critique it and talk about our process and whatnot. And then offer up a link to the project so that fans and patrons and whoever else is interested can take the project and do their own remix of it. Either go in and do their own vocal on it, or go in and play their own drums, or remix it and turn it into the next big dance hit or something like whatever they want to do.
Yeah.
And I thought that would be a really fun idea, and I'm like really excited about it. And I'm telling Tony on the phone the other day, and he goes, I don't know. I mean, I guess we could try it, and if anybody cares about it, but I just wouldn't feel comfortable sharing an idea with people that's not done. I'm like, that's the fun part about it.
Right, yeah. It becomes a collaborative effort instead of just,
I would actually be, if I were doing it in my control, and my band would never do this either. But
this week on ideas that your band will never try.
Yeah, exactly. Like, feel free, anybody, to pick these up. But I would totally just throw out, like, just a bucket of riffs and be like, rate these.
Just like creating a, a focus group for riffs. Just like, okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to play you several riffs, and I just want you to tell us how they make you feel. Okay, here's the first riff, and there's just someone standing in the corner in a lab coat with a pen and a clipboard just going,
That's a little bit more elaborate than I envisioned, but it would just be like, suck, not suck.
Yeah,
that's the votes that you can take. Yeah,
or it's like the thing that they have at the post office and at the DMV where you just push like a number of faces to talk about how your experience was. Smiley face. I always hit the smiley face because, like, I went to the DMV today and I hit the smiley face before I even dealt with the guy, just because I feel bad that they probably have so many people who are just going in there like, just ringing it like an angry ex-girlfriend at the front door, you know?
I think a better scale would be the one at the doctor's office with all the faces, like the faces. It's just like howling.
How's your pain level?
Pain level, howling in pain, and then like just like, oh, I'm okay.
And there's always the one face at the very bottom that is like the most extreme one that's like,
yeah, mind-blowing pain.
Yeah, it's like if you're in that much pain, you're probably not going even to be able to tick off the box next to that face. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in for this episode of the podcast. This is our second live stream episode.
Ooh.
And we're pretty stoked about it. And I'm pretty stoked for the guest that we have today because he has tons of experience in the video field, but primarily you would probably know him as the founder, operator, and chief bottle washer of Seventh Circle Music Collective. Please welcome to the show a good man, a treasure in the Denver local music community. Please welcome Aaron Saye to the show.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much, dude. Appreciate that.
Thanks for coming on. See, now at this point, we're just going to forget that the cameras exist, and we're just going to have a conversation,
Beautiful.
And we're going to quit putting on a performance for people. We just had to get we have to get stuff out of the way at the beginning. It's like, please stay on, keep watching. All right, welcome to the show. Now we got to forget that they're even there.
Cool.
So, dude, thanks for coming in to talk with me, man. I've been looking forward to this because it's like...
Me too.
I know, I mean, you can't help but know that Seventh Circle exists. Like...
Hopefully.
Well, I mean, that's the way I feel about it, is it's like, if somebody says, are there any good all-ages, like, underground spots in Denver?
Sure, yeah.
You know, when I was younger, and I mean, you were around for a ton of this.
Yeah.
Is pretty much, it was like... What about this place? Oh, that place got shut down.
Right.
What about this place? Oh, that place got raided by the cops. What about this place? Oh, that place burned to the ground. You know, like yours is the first all-ages venue that I've seen in Denver. In Colorado, I mean, obviously there's places like Gilman Street in San Francisco and things like that, that are like mainstays.
Mm-hmm.
But Seventh Circle is the first all ages independent, like DIY venue that I have seen last as long as it has and grow as much as it has and maintain, like, not only legitimacy in a street cred sort of sense, but legitimacy in a just like a business sense. Like, you guys have managed to keep your doors open with minimal harassment from authorities, and like, you guys are above board, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So for people who don't know, because I mean, a lot of the people who are going to be watching this and listening to this are going to be people who are friends and fans of yours, because you've touched a lot of lives with what you do, man. So for the people who don't know, because we have people kind of all over the world and people in different bands all over the place who listen to this, just kind of what is the description of no, that was me hitting the spring on that.
Cool.
You're like, my phone made a
my
weird
phone was
noise.
on silent.
No, what is Seventh Circle Music Collective? Like, what is the mission? Who are you guys?
Sure. So Seventh Circle is a DIY venue, which in essence means a volunteer-run, community-run venue that is run by and for members of the community.
Okay.
And the prime focus is to be all ages and to be, non-exclusive in that way, because that is super important and paramount to building any music scene, is to keep it all ages, because if you're restricting access to live music to people when they're actually getting into live music,
when it's becoming a part of their life,
right, exactly, at age 14 or 15 or whatever it is, then like you're shooting the whole scene in the foot,
Like, if I hadn't started going to shows when I was a teenager,
exactly,
I wouldn't be where I am.
No,
right
neither
now.
of us would be in this room right now.
Yeah, not at all.
Mm-hmm.
We'd be what, working at the Gap or something.
No idea.
I have
no idea. I have no idea what my life would be like if that was the case.
So now, this is the only history that I have for context.
Okay.
You took over the Blastomat, right?
Right.
And the Blastomat was more of your traditional type of underground like venue, like it was warehouse shows essentially, right?
Kind of. I mean, it was more or less the same thing. It was it was much more underground though, and there was definitely a period of time where they weren't putting the address on the flyers just for the sake of preservation of the venue's existence and all that kind of thing.
Right.
Ask a punk kind of sort of stuff.
Right. And there's there are still venues like that today.
Right, absolutely.
What, your mom's house is like that, right?
No, that was actually what we called Blastomat for a minute.
Really?
When things were hairy, therefore with some authorities, there was a brief minute in like 2008 that Blastomat was referred to as your grandma's house. Actually,
Isn't there another place?
There is a
right
place
now?
called Your Mom's House. It's a bar venue right next to Wax Tracks on 13.
Oh, okay.
So they're above board too, but they
Okay.
just chose the name Your Mom's House for whatever
Okay,
reason.
I must
But,
be thinking of something else.
Yeah, no, there are a couple others. There's one called Glitter City that is kind of like Ask a Punk for the address sort of thing at this point. It used to be called Thought Forms, and it was kind of almost the same sort of scenario where like Blastomat changed hands and changed names, and
Right.
Thought Forms changed hands and changed names. So, but it's kind of the same thing. Rhinoceropolis was another one that was kind of that way.
Are they now? They're gone.
They're
not
no,
around?
they're back. They were gone for a minute, and they're back now, and they're above board as well. And so it's totally
'Cause
fine to
as you might
put
imagine,
the address on the flyers and all that.
Right, right. As you might imagine, it has been a long time since I've set foot in in a DIY venue, and we were kind of talking about this before we got on mic, and a lot of that has to do with what Karen Kudo was talking about in her episode, which is the rock or be rocked kind of thing.
Right.
Like you only have so much time. So really the only time I get to go out and see shows is if I'm playing them.
Right.
So I have to book a show with the bands that we're playing with. And you and I have kind of touched base over the years about the possibility of doing something.
Right.
But you've been...
It's never actually happened.
It's
though,
never
yeah.
actually happened because you've been busy enough with what you've had going on that you never have had to come solicit me.
Right.
And we've been busy enough doing our own thing that just we've never gotten around to soliciting you.
Right.
But I mean, I would love to come do.
Oh, it'd be a blast.
Yeah, it'd be a blast.
Yeah.
But what would you say? What would you say is the difference that makes the difference between these like Ask a Punk type of venues that tend to be a little more fly by night and tend to maybe collapse or at best be destabilized to some degree, right? Because they're not above board.
Mm-hmm.
What is the biggest difference between what Seventh Circle does and what most like traditional DIY venues, the model that they might follow? Like, what is it that keeps you guys afloat?
I mean, honestly, it's being above board. It's
so what does that entail?
The boring busy work of like actually having a business entity and filing taxes and paying ASCAP and BMI licensing fees and like all the real stuff that real traditional venues out there have to do.
And you're the numbers guy for Seventh Circle, right?
Yep.
So really the only difference at the end of the day is having somebody that is willing to sit down and actually hit the books and make sure that things are getting done in the correct way.
I mean, that's part of it. It's not the only thing. I mean, there's a whole other side of things, which is like, passing fire inspection and making sure the building is up to code for having live events that have X amount of people showing up to congregate, And that has been one of the main things that I've seen a lot of DIY venues around the country get shut down for, is not being up to fire code or not having enough, like it's nuanced little things like not having enough exit doors,
right?
Or not having an exit door that swings the right direction,
right?
For X amount of people to be
or
allowed
plumbing
to be
issues,
in that room. Yeah, stuff like that. Like, I mean, there's always
or not paying certain taxes and fees and getting way in over their head to the point that they can't pay it off.
Sure, yeah, that's certainly something too, I'm sure. But the main thing that I've seen them get shut down for nationwide has been either fire code noncompliance or providing or selling alcohol without a license.
Now, that's something that I wanted to touch on with you, is what is it that is philosophically different and culturally different with Seventh Circle with regard to the Ask a Punk party venue type of spot? You guys are alcohol and drug free, correct?
That's the idea, yeah. And
everything you guys do is alcohol and drug free.
Well,
right?
so I mean, we don't put it out there on any sort of paperwork or whatever, but we do allow BYOB if you're over 21, and we ID everybody at the door.
Right.
And we kind of are just doing that until someone says that we shouldn't or can't, and
right.
So far so good. No one has. So
right, and I wonder.
Don't
what
come calling, liquor board. Although if you do, hey, I don't mind going dry. I don't drink, and I think that people when they get drunk act stupid most of the time.
Yeah.
So like, hey, I wouldn't mind going dry at all. It would be a more hassle for us as a venue to like regulate that at the door and have to be on top of it. But I mean, so far it's overwhelmingly been problem free. And
that's really cool. And how long have you guys been going now?
So Seventh Circle's been open for just over 7 years now.
7 years, dude.
Isn't it wild?
You guys have been going a long time.
Yeah.
And that's a long time to have that policy and have it never manifest as an issue.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because it's almost always a matter of time. When I was a kid, I hung around with a lot of older gentlemen who were only too happy to help me get intoxicated.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like that's not an issue. Now, do you think that has to do with having a lot of volunteers around who are on board with your mission and your set of values?
I mean, yeah, that's definitely a huge part of it because, when you come on to be a volunteer at Seventh Circle, we basically kind of lay out, here's how we operate and here's why it's important.
Right.
And so they're only too happy to go, okay, well, that's what we have to enforce. Like the minimal amount of rules that we have to enforce are literally just for our sustainability and for our preservation as a space.
Right.
And so there's that, but it also has a lot to do with the community that we built because the kids that come there understand that. They understand that if they drink underage there, then they're jeopardizing the very existence of this place that they love so much.
So they kind of keep each other in check.
Right. There's that. And then, it's just it's a huge and overwhelmingly the control lies in the hands of the kids and each other. And it is a lot of a kind of like self-policing sort of scene where everybody loves coming to the place if they're showing up there and they understand that if they jeopardize and get the place shut down, then that's on them, and they don't want that to happen. And so, of course, every once in a while we'll have to deal with some, underage kid who's getting drunk, and then we have to just either, kick them out if they're that far gone, or at least take away the alcohol and explain to them, hey, this is why you can't do this here.
Right.
And then if they choose not to respect that, then they choose not to come around.
Have you always been drug and alcohol free?
I have, yeah.
Wow,
I was
always,
straight edge
really?
before I knew what straight edge was.
Really, that's just the way that you've operated.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
Because I mean, I don't drink or use hard drugs.
Sure.
I use cannabis. You saw the giant trash bag of edibles that Joey brought in at the beginning.
Before we
that
started
I almost feel like I need to go grab and show the people watching when we're on the break.
I dare you.
Dude, this is he brought in a massive, a trash bag full of edibles for me. I'm like, Jesus Christ, Joey, there's no way I'm going to be able to eat all these.
Yeah, I know. It was great because you offered me some, and I was like, no, I don't partake. And I was like, all for you. Take it all.
But,
like, no, it's too much.
I quit because of the damage that it was doing.
Mm-hmm.
And something I've been noticing, and you being around young people so much more.
Right.
Because I've been in the bar scene since I was 21.
Sure.
So I've had very little involvement with the all ages world.
Right.
And I'm having a kid now, I'm starting to take more of an interest in learning more about it. And something I've been observing just with young people in general, and I wanted to see if this is something that you've observed. Do you think that drugs and alcohol are less punk rock now than they were when we were younger?
I think in certain sections of punk rock, absolutely, because the straight edge movement and the sober movement and just being there for each other and being there to help your friends through their addiction struggles is a huge thing that I'm seeing in the scene right now.
Are you seeing more young people at shows for whom sobriety is just their default choice? I just have kind
more
of
so than
observed,
it used to be. Yeah,
it definitely seems like, I don't know if responsible is the right word, but it definitely seems like younger kids are more responsible now than I was when I was that age.
Sure, absolutely, yeah. And I feel that way too. I mean, because how old are you? When did you get into the scene?
I'll be 38 in March.
Okay,
and
you're 3 years older than me.
Yeah, I started playing shows in 96, 97.
Okay.
So I was probably going to shows by that point.
Right.
I was interested in shows by 95 at least.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was going to shows, it was a lot more warehouse parties with kegs.
Sure.
And, I didn't do cocaine for the first time until I was substantially older. I think I was probably in my late 20s before I did cocaine for the first time, but I was definitely drinking a lot and smoking a lot of pot. I took hallucinogens pretty early on, which I still support, but, I was definitely in that world of the drunk punk wastoid party guy thing, and that was the cool scene to be in when I was doing it. And it seems I work with a lot of young people.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say young people, I mean people that are 10 years younger than me or more, right?
Sure.
And a lot of what I've observed is they tend to have a lot more agency and responsibility and personal accountability than I did 10 years ago.
Sure. Okay.
You know?
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if you have observed that as kind of an emerging component of modern alternative culture, we'll say.
Yeah, I mean, I have, the only lens I really have on it is Seventh Circle because that's just my everyday.
Which is an interesting sample group.
Right, absolutely. But I mean, definitely I have noticed a shift in that for sure over the last, 15 to 17 years that I've been going to shows. So I started going to shows in 2002, 2003 as like a sort of a regular thing, and discovered the underground punk scene in 2004, 2005, and started to go to shows on that level at like the Climax Lounge and the Fallen Skate Warehouse and all those places.
Fallen Skate Warehouse.
I miss that place. It was so fun.
It was so cool.
That's one that the building isn't even there anymore.
Well, that's one of those venues that we're talking about.
Yeah,
one of
where
those
was just
Ask a Punk places.
And it was Ask a Punk, and you walked in and there was a keg, and you bought a cup if you wanted to. Yeah,
right. And dudes just thrashing it up on the bowls.
It was amazing. That place was incredible.
Yeah.
But yeah, during that time between 2004 to 2006 or 7, most of the shows that I would go to, I felt like the only sober person there, and it was an all-ages show, and everybody was teenagers. We all were, and it definitely, it never like off-put me or anything. I never felt like uncomfortable being the only non-drinker there or whatever, because I was always just kind of like, I'm here, I'm going to film the show, I'm going to enjoy it, like you all do you, and we're all going to hang out. It doesn't matter, I went to a bunch of those like you're talking about the whole like drunk punk, party punk parties because those were my friends, and they still are, and I definitely have noticed a shift though over the subsequent years of more people being way more conscious of that. And there are a lot of kids that I know in the Seventh Circle scene in particular now who are between 17 and 19 who have already just made the conscious choice of like, I'm not going to drink and do drugs. I don't want to. And maybe they're not claiming straight edge, and maybe they're not in the hardcore scene where straight edge is such a movement. It's more of just a personal choice for them where they're just like, I don't want to do that. That seems like a waste of my time and a waste of my health and a waste of my money. And I was just like, cool, you're thinking exactly the same way that I always have, but unprompted, Right. And it's been really interesting and really cool to see that shift and to see that it's not, I'm not going to shows where there are 2 or 3 16-year-olds passed out in front of the venue before the show even starts, which is how it used to be in 2005.
Do you see a lot of fights? Do you see
No, not a lot.
God, that's so cool.
Isn't it nice? Oh my God.
I remember just seeing so much violence at shows. I had friends hospitalized.
Oof.
I know, God, years ago we did a private party in Casper, Wyoming, and a guy got, and it was just such a tragic thing because this guy got super drunk, and he was picking a fight. He's walking around picking a fight because people act like animals when they're drunk.
Sure.
By the way, thanks to our sponsor, YOLO Rum, for being, we're pretty much just going to be trash. Thanks, Wiggins. Love you.
YOLO Rum.
Hey, drink responsibly. Anyway, no, but we would have these, this guy was really drunk, and he was kind of like going around picking fights, and he got beat up. Mm-hmm. Which would happen anywhere, which would happen in the grocery store if you're acting like a maniac.
Fight. Yeah, exactly.
But the guy ended up, people don't realize how much damage you can do to someone in a fight, especially people who don't know how to fight. Mm-hmm. They don't realize, like, you can kill somebody. Mm-hmm. And in this case, they did.
Oh, jeez.
This guy at our show got beat up, and then he went home and he died in his sleep that night.
Oh, my God.
And a friend of ours happened to be involved in the fight, and he was a pretty popular, pretty well-known guy. And so he was immediately named because everybody knew him.
Right.
And he refused to rat on anybody who, it was a group thing.
Sure, yeah.
The guy got his ass kicked by the show.
Jumped, yeah.
you know, the show got rid of him. And because he wouldn't turn on anybody, they threw him in prison for 15 years.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. Yeah, they threw him in prison for 15 years. And I have one friend, who may be watching right now, my buddy Biscuit, if you're out there, you're listening to the show or watching it, he ended up with like permanent cauliflowering and injuries from getting jumped at his show.
Yeah.
And it's like, I hate that was the cool thing to do for a while.
Right.
And it makes you almost kind of have to develop this identity of being something of an animal yourself, so that
as a defense mechanism. Yeah.
It's because you want to be involved in the scene, you want to be part of everything, you want to go see shows, but you kind of have to like toughen yourself up a little bit and maybe adopt an identity that isn't complementary to who you really are.
Right.
Because of that.
Yeah, you have to create this rough exterior to
Right.
fit in with the scene and not get messed with.
Do you
know?
think that, because it's an interesting thing sociologically, because it could go either way. It could be the result of an increased popularity in the idea of individual sovereignty. You know, it could be people are becoming more individualized now in the age of social media, where everyone's an avatar and yada yada. You know, everybody's an influencer. It could be that type of thing, or it could also be more a collectivist idea where it is just not as popular to be a wastoid, violent, aggressive maniac.
Right.
From your perspective, what have you observed with relationship to the way that young people are behaving differently individually and as a group?
Well, I mean, yet again, it's from the Seven Circle lens, and so
it's hard to say.
Specifically
what I
exactly.
want to know.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it's just always been an interesting analysis to me, because I can't tell for sure if that's an overall scene shift or if that's something that we had a hand in creating as an environment. And I feel like it may be a little bit of both, because, like you said, there are plenty of people out there who are just opting to just be sober or be more responsible and not be a wastoid partier for their own health and for their own sake, or for, you know, the people around them, or whatever their reasoning may be. But I mean, that's definitely the type of attitude that we try to foster at Seven Circle too. It's like, come for the music,
right?
Enjoy yourself, be responsible, be respectful above all to everybody else around you and to yourself. You know,
I read the section on your website about, you know, kind of the rules and the values of the place, and like the frequently asked questions and stuff like that. And the voice that I read from that is like, great, everybody's welcome, but, you know, treat everybody that same way.
Right.
You know, everybody's welcome. This is a safe and inclusive place. You know, it's not in a finger wagging, preachy kind of way.
Right.
It's kind of in this way of like, hey, everybody can come in. Just, you know, like one of our
be nice to each other.
Yeah. One of in our band, the philosophy that we communicate is just one rule, and that's just be cool.
Yeah.
You know, that's Tony's dad, Dave, is like that. That's his one rule in life, and we adopted it and wrote a song about it. And all sorts of stuff. But it's like just be cool, man. That's it. As far as rules for life. In fact, if you look at our Facebook group, like for fans of the band, the only rule on the page is just be cool.
Cool.
And I really like that is the voice of Seventh Circle.
Yeah.
It like, you look at something like Gilman. Gilman is a lot more abrasive about it.
I see what you're saying.
You know what I mean? Like Gilman is a lot more 80s, 90s punk rock studded and spiked about it. You know, like you can almost see it just like spray painted and stencil block lettering that is like, fuck you, and this is what we stand for, and like that type of thing. But at Seventh Circle, it definitely has this voice more of like, come on in, man. You know, it's not a problem until it's a problem.
Right.
You know, and I think that with that type of voice, you are more likely to cull people in who might still be, especially young men. You bring in, well, young people in general, you know, really young people who are like first getting into it. You're creating this, they are in a very tenuous position where they could tip either way at any moment,
right,
and become an amazing, productive, community integrated individual, you know, or they could go the other way and become an asshole.
Right.
You know, and so when they walk in through your doors, the experience that they are going to have is very much going to influence the trajectory of the next several years of their lives.
Right.
I mean, the shows that I went to certainly affected the trajectory of my life. And, you know, some ways very positive, but some ways extremely negative.
Right.
You know, and required corrective required certain action, corrective action after the fact. You know what I mean? So I want to commend you on that for sure.
Thank you.
So we talked about going to shows early on in your when you were a young person in the early 2000s, and you're a few years younger than me. So how old were you when you first started going to shows?
I was actually a little older than a lot of the kids that are getting into it now. I don't think let's see, I didn't find like underground DIY shows until I was, I think, 19.
Okay.
And so I started out going then, so I was a little bit on the older end of the, the teenage spectrum there.
Right.
And I started the first quote unquote real punk show I went to was Warped Tour 2002, but I was already 16 by then.
Who was at Warped Tour 2002?
It was Anti-Flag, Flogging Molly, Bad Religion, No Effects,
Oh,
Real Big
okay,
Fish,
cool.
The Casualties. It was when Warped
Cool.
Tour was a punk tour still.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it was great. And so that day, I kind of feel shaped the trajectory of my life, because I went with the sole intention of seeing Bad Religion. They were the only band that I even was really familiar with on that tour
Right.
at that time, because they were kind of my entrance to punk rock, along with, it was like them and AFI and Blink-182 basically were my entrance to punk rock. And Bad Religion was the sole band on that tour in 2002 that I wanted to see. And just being at that show and going and being there all day, I discovered Anti-Flag and Flogging Molly.
It opened up a whole new world for you.
Completely. And there were anti-racist activists there passing out flyers talking about a neo-Nazi congregation that was happening in Denver in 3 weeks, and recruiting people to come and help protest it. And so
you even got into the activism part of it pretty early.
Right. That was at the first punk show.
Wow.
Yeah. So I saved one of those flyers, and me and a friend went to the protest. And
so what did that protest look like?
So it was really interesting. What it was is this group of neo-Nazis had set up a music festival. And it was one of those things where no one knew where it was, and you had to go through a bunch of checkpoints to prove that you were actually worthy to go to the show.
It wasn't like something in the city where they were setting up a demonstration.
No.
This was like a commune sort of thing.
Right, and so, but we had, the ARA had gotten wind of it, and so they were trying to recruit a bunch of people to try and disrupt it, basically. And so we all met up at a park, and we're just kind of there, and we're trying to figure out where their checkpoints were so we could figure out how to disrupt that. And we actually, as a group of people, didn't end up physically encountering the Nazis or doing anything that caused harm to their event. But what happened was one of the organizers figured out where one of their checkpoints was, and it was the Safeway at 6th and Downing. And there were
the Safeway at 6th and Downing was a neo-Nazi,
just like somebody in the parking lot. There was a car.
I mean, not to put
Safeway on blast. No, not at all. It was that was just the parking lot they chose.
Who knew?
And
so Safeway was involved.
So no,
apparently
it wasn't
not
Safeway at all.
So Safeway, huh?
But anyway, what happened was there was just a car in the parking lot that you were supposed to go there, approach the car, and say something, or there was a password kind of thing, I'm sure, that everybody got emailed out, and then they would tell you where the next checkpoint was, and you would have to go there and check in with them, and then eventually after 4 or 5 of these, they would tell you where the show was happening.
Man, what does it say?
And so hold on, let me finish the story, because it was wild. So what one of our activist leaders did from our group of people was she called the police and said that somebody was harassing her and trying to sell her drugs in the parking lot of this Safeway. So the cops showed up and made the skinheads leave, and then all of a sudden the checkpoint was gone, and there were all these Nazis showing up to the parking lot not knowing where to go next. And so it totally blew their whole operation. And then they found out that the location for the show was the Aslan Theater at 10th and Santa Fe.
What?
And they called them, and the owner of the venue had no idea what he had booked. The organizer just said, it's going to be a rowdy punk show, and everybody's going to be pretty ridiculous looking. And he was like, okay.
Well,
so
they
she
were
explained
family
to him,
owned.
right.
Right.
And she explained to him what it was about to be, so he canceled the show then and there. And the organizer of the festival was just like, you can't do that. You're reneging on the contract and freedom of speech. And he was like, fuck you, take me to court. And so all of a sudden, they didn't have a venue for their show either. And what I ended up hearing later, there was a big Westward article about this whole thing.
Right.
And that's how I know most of this information. In the moment, in the day, we just hung out with a bunch of punks in the park, and then everybody eventually heard that it had gotten shut down and disrupted, and so we all went home.
See?
But what ended up happening, I guess, according to the Westward story, was they found some hall, some privately owned hall where whoever the owner was didn't care, and they allowed the show to go on, and they had like flown a band in from Germany, and like it was this whole thing.
Wow.
And I guess all the bands got to play, but because they lost so much, steam on the whole thing, apparently they lost like $5 or $6 grand on the whole festival. And so all in all, we kind of considered it to be a success.
That's
even
a victory, I'd
even
say.
though we didn't, like myself and my friend actually didn't do anything other than show up and be a part of the group. But the Westward guy who wrote the article, it's a really interesting article if you look it up. It's from 2002. Sometime in July or August, and I can't remember what the article is called, but I still have the physical Westward from it. But it's online too, for sure. But the White Like Me, that's what it's called. That's what the article is called.
Huh.
And the author of it happened to be a white guy who was bald, and so he went and he infiltrated the festival, pretending to be a Nazi after he had come.
That's not the safe way.
No, not at all. He put himself in danger for sure.
He took the danger away.
He got the story by pretending to be a part of the crew, and he also had come to the park and talked to a couple of the people that organized our counter protest thing, and got some information from them, and like really did a very, very good comprehensive piece on this whole thing. And it's a really well done article, and so that was just kind of my entrance into, the politics behind punk rock.
That's journalism right there, man.
Yeah,
that's cool.
It was
Well,
was wild to read that article.
This is also when Westward used to be much more of like the independent local rag.
Right.
You know what I mean? Yeah. Like I won't get on a back in the day soapbox, but when the paper Westward and Muddies were around and places like that, like they were doing some really interesting stuff.
Yeah,
and like
great.
that was the only place you could go to get information about shows. And
right,
things like
yeah, before the internet age.
So first of all,
yeah, sorry I cut you off.
No. I just something occurred to me in the middle of it, and I wanted to hear your whole story.
Mm-hmm.
So first of all, what does it say about your belief system if you need to set up 5 checkpoints just to get together and have a meetup? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
you're obviously doing something
that should
wrong.
be a dead giveaway right there. But I mean, with a lot of those extremist types, like white nationalists, radical extremist types, they think that is self-evident.
Mm-hmm.
Like they think it's evidence that like they're onto something and their cause trying to be shut down by the Zog machine and blah blah blah. Like they think that the fact that they have to jump through all those hoops to even make it work, the fact that they have so many enemies is evidence that they're on to something.
Right.
But to me, it would just be like, hey, guys, maybe we need to rethink this whole thing.
Exactly.
If everyone else
There is no
isn't
safe space for Nazis.
Yeah, well, I do think it's hilarious that they chose the safe way to meet up.
Yeah,
It's like
that's so funny.
It's like, here is the safe way.
I
the
didn't
white
even think about that
supremacist rally.
aspect about it. That's so funny, yeah.
Meet us at the safe way.
The password is detergent.
But and then the other that's hilarious. And then the other thing I was thinking of immediately is, I do believe in the primacy of free speech, but this is where I fall off the free speech train. This is where I get off.
Exactly.
It's like hey man, you do have the freedom to go speak wherever you do have the freedom to go occupy any public space you want. Go to the Capitol, have your little party, not hiding out somewhere and not and not at a private venue that is owned by private citizens. You know what I mean? Like they have the right to say no. They have the right to shut your fucking show down.
Mm-hmm.
They have the right to kick you out. It's like, the people who are like, like extremists who might get deplatformed, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm not a big fan of the hair trigger sensitivity of deplatforming that we've seen in recent years. I do think I think the tilt setting is set a little high personally right now, a little sensitive right now. But like when I look at people who may be extremists and they're pissed because they're getting taken off of YouTube or getting kicked off of Twitter or whatever, it's like, and they're bitching and moaning about free speech. It's like, hey man, these people have the freedom to control what speech is on their platform.
Right.
You know what I mean? And you're welcome to create your own thing.
Yeah.
Make your own YouTube.
Yeah.
Make your own Twitter. Make racist Twitter, man.
Oh,
And
God.
you guys could just sit around agreeing with each other. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
That's
or
really
maybe don't.
Yeah, please.
yeah, or don't.
Maybe think about your ways and your views, and realize that everybody's a person, and you should maybe respect everybody, and just
No,
I'm
there's
just
an
being an
idea.
idealist
There's
here.
an idea.
I was listening to an interview with the daughter of Fred Phelps, and she got out.
She got out, didn't she? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I was listening to an interview with her, and you know what got her out?
What?
Is Twitter.
Really?
Because, now this is something that is an argument for unbridled, open discourse on Twitter. This is like, even if you made like Twitter Raw, like made a separate one that there's a new one that started up that is ThinkSpace, which is completely I think it's completely
I'll fix it. It's fine.
no, right there, yeah. I think it's completely censorship free, but I'm not sure. But if the thing that is interesting about that sort of unlimited, broad, full spectrum discourse is you look at someone like this woman, Fred Phelps' granddaughter, who she went onto Twitter and she is spewing all the Westboro Baptist Church nonsense, and she's getting met with resistance. She's arguing and engaging with people. Now, of course, most of it is just unbridled, like disgusting vitriol and just people yelling shit.
Sure.
But a small part of it was intellectuals. I want to say that it was a rabbi.
Interesting.
That she actually engaged with.
It was. That's my neck of the woods over there.
Is it?
Yeah.
It was. Oh yeah.
Literally live just right up the road.
Well,
wow.
Then can you expand upon that a little bit about kind of what went on with her and how she ended up leaving? Do you know anything about that?
I mean, just in a nutshell, basically, she got into a very public, Twitter war, I guess is how you would describe it. But then it actually ended up being a very thoughtful dialogue between the two of them, and I think a lot of
once the vitriol had subsided.
Yeah, I think a lot of it actually took place like off screen or off platform. Like there was a lot of emailing back and forth, and then there were phone calls, I think, and then ultimately there's actually a really good article about this, and I can't remember what it's in, but
I did just listen to an interview with her.
Yeah,
where she was
she's
talking
a really
about
interesting. Yeah, she's a really interesting. From being on that side and then kind of flipping completely. That organization is just the worst, dude. Like, like they were everywhere, dude. They went to all the shows that I went to as a kid. They were there. Like if 9 Inch Nails and the Melvins played, they were there. Like any of those bigger shows.
Well, what's interesting about it, Gordo,
they were protesting ballets, for fuck's sake.
What's interesting about it is, yes, so much of it has to do with their ideology and their, commonly erroneous claim that a lot of demagogues make, which is that their interpretation of the Bible is the only one that there is, or their interpretation of whatever ideology is the only that there is. Obviously, that was there too. But such a big part of it for Fred Phelps was deliberately being a provocateur, an antagonist, because he saw the attention that he could get from it.
He used to come up to campus at KU with "Gay U" signs. Ugh.
Just to get attention.
Literally just protesting
just to
in
market
in front of the student union, just with their "Gay U" signs. Just
didn't they also weren't a lot of the people in the family lawyers, and they knew that they could do that for their free speech, and then they could, and then when they got assaulted by people who disagreed with them, they would take them to court and they would win.
Yeah,
I remember hearing
they're
that
very
was a big
litigious.
Part of it too. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I also heard in this interview. And we've gone on a major tangential aside, but that's the way this goes.
That's why 3-hour podcasts exist.
Yeah, exactly, right. But I remember in this interview, she said 3 different people, 3 different documentarians have come to follow them and document them and learn about them. And out of those 3, one of them actually joined the church. Ooh. One of the documentarians actually stayed there. I want to say married into the family, too. Oh, my God. Because they're mostly family. Yeah. It's mostly like one family. The Phelps family, and they proliferated and made a bunch of people, and They put their little signs in the hands of kids and shit like that. And
yeah, it's awful.
Well, and so much of it, too, is like when you hear about this discussion she had with this rabbi, the way she sort of summarized it is they were kind of quoting scripture back and forth at each other. And it seems like such a simple thing that if you had access to mainstream society and you had access to alternative viewpoints or a broad spectrum of information, it would be impossible for something like that to even exist.
Right.
You know, she was converted with not a tremendous amount of effort. You know, it took a little bit of correspondence to kind of turn her around. And I think
kind of open her eyes.
Well, and it totally did. And that's what's interesting is we're seeing so much about how the threat of white supremacist groups and radical like hate groups. We see so much reporting about how it's growing and thriving and increasing in size. But I feel like the more human beings are getting exposed to the amount of information that we're getting exposed to, it can't help but shrink down.
Right.
You know, I feel like it's receding, but it's getting reported on more.
Yeah, and I mean, it also could be, you know, things like that kind of tend to grow more right before their last dying gasp of existence.
It's like the death rattle sort of thing.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously the Trump election has had everything to do with that being more of a thing that became more prevalent, but also that became more prevalent in the media. Well, whether it was more prevalent or not, just because he emboldened all of those people that shared that extreme aspect of his beliefs.
Emboldened them to speak up at the very least.
Exactly, instead of to just stay in hiding where they already were anyway.
Right. And from a media standpoint, now this is the other thing that behind the curtain that I think people need to remember, and you know, to me it's self-evident, but it bears repeating.
Sure.
And I've mentioned this on the podcast before, is, you know, these news networks from CNN to Fox to MSNBC, all the way to The Atlantic and Vox and The Washington Post and BuzzFeed and da-da-da-da-da, all of them have staff meetings every morning where they get together and they talk about what they're going to do to get people to get eyeballs on their content.
Right. That's all it is.
And Trump is the best goddamn reality show that has been on in a very long time. You know what I mean?
Yep, you're not wrong.
So we had an open house, a Nug Nation open house not too long ago. And one the guy who does our 3D printing, who I showed you some of the stuff, he was dating a woman who worked for CNN. Very just fascinating to like actually sit and talk to this. She was like a program director for CNN.
Okay.
And she said the reason she left is because every staff meeting was just all like Trump. That's like that was their bread and butter. And she's like, can we talk about anything else? For the love of God, can we cover something else? And they were like, as soon as the numbers slow down, they were like, if people stop looking at it, yeah, we'll move on to something else. But right now, our numbers are the highest they've ever been, and people have all eyes on us for our reporting on the matter. And she would get communiques. She would get correspondence. She would get contacted and comments and whatever you get from people who were going, can you cover something else? Can you cover something else that's going on in the world instead of participating in this? You know, there's other things going on in the world that we have to be, you know, there's achievements of human civilization that are going on right now. And can you cover some of that stuff? And she would have to tell these people, be like, look, if you and all these other people stop engaging in this content, we'll stop producing it. But I mean that like she ended up leaving as a result of it.
You know, something that didn't get covered too much in my neck of the woods was a punk band shot a pornographic video on the Westboro Baptist Church's.
I remember hearing about this. Yes,
it's the band is called Get Shot. You can look it up online. I mean, it's not the best.
They went to their property and shot a porno.
And they had to make it quick, as you might imagine.
Just the whole thing, them just like.
But yeah,
it's
like
called
that was
"Fucking in a Hurry" live at the Westboro Baptist Church.
That was definitely one of my favorite tidbits of news from the area. I was glad it got a little bit of coverage.
That's great. Do you think Fred Phelps saw it before he died?
I hope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hope it was the reason that he died. No, it's just so you were dealing with the younger demographic more outside of the social media space and outside of what we're seeing politically and ideologically on social media and the massive news channels. Like what are you seeing as far as the way that kids are interacting with each other in these environments when they're going to shows? Like is it a lot of peaceful discourse? Is it a lot of like not even interest in global politics? Are you seeing a lot of activism like when you first got into it? Like what are you seeing going on at the shows?
It's kind of all of it. I mean, there's definitely, a group of kids that are very, very active in the anti-fascist organizing that's going on now, and there are also a lot of kids who are, for lack of a better term, kind of apathetic about it. And maybe it's a lack of interest, or maybe it's a lack of stamina to be involved, because it takes a lot to be involved in something like that, And
especially because a lot of any organization starts to come unglued when its mission statement starts to get decimated by nuance.
Right.
You know what I mean? If you are going to organize a cause, it kind of has to have something that everyone can get behind.
Mm-hmm.
It's like fuck breast cancer. Okay, we're gonna go walk around because we all agree fuck breast cancer. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And what I have seen happening a lot with activists in general is there tends to be more gray in the conversation, and so people kind of like drop out if they're not like the most extremely like married to the cause.
Right.
I would say.
Sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, we've seen a lot of that, but it's been, and we kind of wrestled with that too, as far as like, what does Seven Circles stand for? Obviously, we've got all the, the norms of no racism, no sexism, no homophobia, no transphobia, all the inclusivity stuff, which is just a norm for any DIY venue, but it's like you were saying, because that's what's spray painted in the block lettering at Gilman on their wall,
Right.
But it has a slightly different vibe for us because it's more of a very like colorful, welcoming environment. That's like, yes, this is beautiful and welcoming because of these.
It's a fun place to be.
Right. Exactly.
Right. And it's not like we are on the other side of the war. It's like we are trying to foster an environment that supports these values that we have.
Right, exactly.
And it's a subtle thing, but to me, it makes all the difference.
Exactly, absolutely.
It's less adversarial.
Mm-hmm.
It focuses less on it focuses less on the nemesis and more on like what you were trying to create.
Right. It's like, this is what we are. This is what you are.
And we'd love it if you'd be part of it.
Yes, exactly.
Come be part of it.
Exactly.
Yep.
And so, being involved in that aspect of it and being involved in the space that creates that environment for these kids and for anybody that needs it to come and feel welcome and feel like they have the total free reign to be themselves or figure out who that is if they're young enough to where they're still working.
Because that's what most of it is.
Yeah.
I don't think any. Like I don't think. I think kids are just. I was just figuring things out.
Mm-hmm. We all were.
Your entire
we all still
adolescence.
are,
Right. Well, your entire life,
yeah.
You're trying to figure out who you are, and you never really figure it out, I don't think.
Right.
But when you're a teenager, you're especially like from a developmental perspective,
exactly. Yeah.
trying to develop who you are as a social, sexual, being.
Right.
And so you need a space. And there's the term safe spaces gets thrown around a lot, but I think it's more of just just leave me the fuck alone and let me figure it out space.
Right.
It's a Mike Muir space. Just leave me alone. I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
But they just keep bugging me. kids just kind of need a space to go and go, okay, I'm a person. My body's starting to do things. How do I want to look? What do I want to say to the world? Who am I? How do I tell you who I am? Da, 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 you know.
Right.
And I think it's really cool that you are creating an environment where people can come in and develop that rather than feel like, okay, well, it's really important for me to be included, so I want to make sure that I adopt all these components of the club in order to join the tribe.
Right.
You know, and I don't know if that subtle distinction was deliberate, but if it was, I want you to know that I have caught it. Like, I've observed it from the beginning since you guys have been doing stuff. You know, obviously just from like seeing what you put out into the world. I mean, the only way I know about what you're doing is hearing about it from other people or seeing it on social media.
Right,
but
right.
I've like watched that continue over time.
And the fact that you've been able to pick up on that and haven't actually been to a lot of shows says volumes.
Right.
About how
that your message is conveyed
we actually
very clearly.
have been,
right.
Which is really good to know because, I mean, being at such the center of the place, it's hard for me to see it from that outside perspective.
Right.
You know, I see it from the perspective of being involved in the day in and the day out of everything that is involved with that venue. And I see it in the individuals, you know, because, I mean, being who I am and being like, I mean, Seventh Circle, like you said, it's an influential place to a lot of kids that need it. But I know full well that that is an extension, or I'm an extension of that, or that is an extension of me, whatever way it is, because I know full well that I have been individually a good influence on a lot of kids too. And,
right.
And I mean, they would be the first to tell you the same thing. They've told me the same thing. And so it's like seeing it from that perspective, because, you know, the way that ability to be influential flows from me is just like establishing friendships with a lot of these kids who are our regulars and being that good influence for them when they need it. And
which we all need.
Yeah,
which we all need when we're first hanging around.
Exactly, yeah. And so seeing that from an individualistic basis in all of these kids that I know that I've become friends with through their presence at the venue has been the thing that has really kind of resonated with me and just driven home the point that, yes, we're doing things right. Yes, we're being a positive influence on the people that need it. And yes, we're standing for the right things. Because, you know, when I'm at the center of it and there's so much, you know, drama back and forth about like, how do we handle this situation that came up? Or how do we make a stance against this, but still remain just like a music venue that's not trying to be lumped in with any
Tell me about
side
some of
things.
that. Tell me about some of these things, because I'm curious
I guess,
about
yeah,
what you're
I'm being
referring
fairly
to.
vague. Yeah, true. So, you know, I mean, like I said, and like you agreed with, of course, we have the norms of the no racism, no sexism, homophobia, all that stuff. And there have been gray areas where things will happen where, like, somebody will be accused of using a racial slur sometime in their life.
Right.
But it's like, okay, are we going to just cancel them, or are we going to help educate them as to why that was a mistake?
Right.
You know, like and there are different people on different sides of that are a part of the community, and so it becomes a debate with just little, almost inconsequential things like that. But it's very frustrating because, you know, based on how we choose to handle it, that reflects on the venue as a whole, and that reflects on me as an individual because people view me as the face of the venue. And you know,
that's a delicate situation,
right? And so, you know, a lot of the time, like, my first instinct is, okay, let's figure out why this person said that, what their intention was behind it.
Let's get the background.
How to educate them on why it was a mistake, and just the simple fact of, hey, don't do that again. But, you know, there are definitely people in the scene that will say things like, no, fuck them, they need to be canceled and ostracized because of this mistake that they made. It's like, dude, they didn't murder anybody.
The problem is that when you...
But it's like, where do you draw the line? Where do you draw the line?
Well, it's not going to win anybody over if you can't work with them and try and figure out.
And then all we're doing is creating a person who, A, isn't welcome at the venue when they probably need it the most.
Well, and you're creating an army in exile as well.
Right, exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like, so there's this, I read when I was 21 years old, I read the spiritual teachings of Marcus Aurelius. Mm-hmm. And Marcus Aurelius had this one quote out of everything I've read in that entire book, because it's just a bunch of his musings from when he was the emperor of Rome.
Right.
And he said, people are created for the sake of one another. Either try to teach them or bear with them. And that has stuck with me for a
Wow,
very
that's a
long
really good
time.
one. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so I understand not willing to I understand not desiring to engage with and take the time to listen to someone with a repellent perspective.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
But here's the thing. Let's take the most extreme case.
Mm-hmm.
You take someone like Richard Spencer, all right?
Yeah.
And if you publicly beat Richard Spencer up and exile him from everything,
Mm-hmm.
then he goes to a place where other exiles and he can gather strength.
Yep.
And they can go, we are the exiles of society, you know, let's rise up and fight
And that's
back.
how you create Nazis.
Exactly.
If they weren't already,
as
then they're going
opposed
to become.
Right, exactly. And so conversely, if you took someone like Richard Spencer and invited Richard Spencer to a debate with one of the most articulate public intellectuals alive today, you know, there are thousands of reputable, intelligent public intellectuals right now who could debate him into the ground.
Right.
You know, he's the best guy on your team. We're going to get the best guy or gal on our team, and you guys are going to have a public debate, and we're all going to watch it.
Yeah.
Because then what happens then is
Well, it could be similar to the granddaughter of Fred Phelps talking with the rabbi.
Exactly.
You know, I mean, you could affect positive change in this
Exactly.
person's life where they're so lost that they're going down this terribly negative path that is causing so many negative effects on society based on their actions.
Right.
And you could actually turn that around, save that person from who they were becoming,
right.
and you know, affect positive change on a
Right.
bigger scale.
I remember when Trump first got elected, and I was working at the Overland, and that place was an interesting place to be.
Yeah, I bet.
Because so like there was people making signs there for protests and stuff. You know what I mean? Like it, you know, hey, big surprise, the Overland is run by, you know, a bunch of lefty punk rockers. You
Right.
know what I mean? So it was like when he got elected, people were pissed, and it was time to go to the fucking mattresses and throw down. You know what I mean? So there was a lot of discussion and impassioned debate. And it was a really interesting place to be for a minute. And there was, you know, people making picket signs for rallies and things like that. It was really fascinating to watch from behind the bar.
Sure, yeah.
And but I remember thinking to myself, and I had this conversation with some guests one night. I was like, imagine you have someone from like Mississippi, from like a rural town in Mississippi. Now, where he's from in Mississippi, he is considered the most progressive liberal person in his community. And you transplant him out. Let's say he gets into some liberal arts college in Oregon or Washington or Colorado or whatever, you know, ends up at CU Boulder, right? And you plant him in that, and he begins to socialize and begins to mix it up, and people's different cultural backgrounds start to emerge and the ideologies associated with those different cultural backgrounds. And he starts saying some things that might be unenlightened in the environment that he's in. You know, like someone who grew up in Manhattan, somebody or Brooklyn or Boulder or Denver is going to have a different experience than someone who grew up in, you know, Tuscaloosa or, you know, wherever, you know, or like Jacksonville, Florida or something like that. You know, they're going to have a different experience.
Right.
But let's say this you know, this guy is really well-intentioned and wants to do it, but he says something in a conversation. Now, at that point, there's a choice point. The people that he's talking to can either scream him out of the room, shaking their finger in his face, you know, ostracize him from social events, or they can take a breath, have a little patience, and talk with the guy and try and educate him and develop a relationship with that person, help that person change and grow.
And figure out where that came from in their head in order to kind of debunk what their thought process was and go, okay, here's why we feel like this was incorrect.
Right.
You know?
Hey, Gordo, can you look something up while we're sitting here talking? So I want to make sure I get the name of this woman right. We've talked about her on the show a couple times, but I really want to repeat the names of the documentaries in her name so that people can find it. Can you find the name of the director who did the documentaries, White Right and Jihadist, I think is the name of it. She's a documentary filmmaker. I think she's a Muslim Norwegian woman of color.
Dia Khan.
Yeah, Dia Khan. So she did a couple documentaries.
Deeyah Khan.
Check it out.
As in wrath of.
So so, well, what's interesting is her documentaries are not. Was that Wiggins?
Yeah, it was. It was a really good one too.
The interesting thing is the documentaries are not particularly wrathful. She talks about. I listened to an interview that this woman did, and early on, she was an activist. You know, she was the person throwing stuff and hurling insults at white supremacists in Norway when she was growing up. And I mean, what's interesting is in these very, hyper egalitarian progressive nations in Scandinavia and other parts of Europe, there's there's this underbelly of where that stuff still exists, and it still exists in a fair amount of potency. But she would go to these protest rallies and throw rocks at them and get into it with them, and she was a very aggressive activist. And she's talking about this time, and she ended up becoming a documentary filmmaker. And both the documentaries she did, she just sat and had conversations with really who would ever talk to her from these movements. Most people wouldn't talk to her.
Yeah.
But the few that did, the thing that was really interesting is in both the case of the white supremacist groups and the jihadists, they both, the ideology kind of melted away at a certain point. When she got them down into the conversation, away from the rhetoric and away from, once they got past all their sound bites, and the reality of who they were started to emerge, it was interesting how much these people had in common. Both documentaries showed these guys who experienced very common stuff that young men experience, confusion and isolation and feeling like they didn't belong and having these problems going out into the world, and then somebody came along and groomed them and didn't even start with the rhetoric, didn't even start with the politics or the ideology, started with, hey, I know you're having a lot of trouble meeting people, and I know you're having a lot of trouble making friends.
Yeah, it
and
just comes from attention, giving them positive attention.
Right.
Yeah, attention and encouragement.
Yep.
And people need so little encouragement to do well, to thrive in the world. You know what I mean? And I feel like, especially we talked about those kids who are walking in through your doors for the first time. And the slightest amount of encouragement or ostracizing is going to change who they are. It's going to change them forever.
Yep.
Right? And so I think it's really cool that you guys create this environment where people are encouraged to come in. They are encouraged to be inclusive. I think people do better when you tell them what you want them to do, not what you don't want them to do.
Right.
You know what? Does that make sense?
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. And so
because it's positivity rather than negativity.
Right. And
we as humans are conditioned to thrive on positivity.
Well, we're social beings.
Right.
And we are going to go wherever we feel understood. We are going to be drawn towards, and this is going to be the corniest parallel. So just bear with me. Did you ever see, man, because this movie was the outrage porn of its time.
Okay.
Higher Learning. Did you ever see Higher Learning?
No, I never did.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, yes.
Higher Learning. It came out in the 90s, and it had Michael Rappaport opposite Ice Cube, and God, who else was in that?
Those are the principles I recall. I can't remember who else is in that movie.
Like,
it's been a really long time.
In fact, the artwork is just an amalgam of symbols.
But it's just a John Singleton film, right?
Right. And it's like it all takes place in this university, and there's all the like different activist groups. Like there's like Ice Cube is part of like the Black Power group, and Michael Rappaport comes to school, this like awkward, goofy, tall, skinny white dude, and he like goes to a party and no one likes him and he's having trouble fitting in, and then he like meets these crazy Nazis and ends up like becoming a Nazi himself.
Whoa.
And like,
dude, it's Omar Epps is in
Omar
that,
Epps is in
and,
it. That's right.
Christy Swanson.
What? Dude, but it's not just those two groups. Like it's pretty much the conflict between like all the groups, all the tribes on this campus.
Okay.
And it's like it's totally during the 90s when it's fascinating how history repeats itself, just like cycles so predictably. But
Right.
like it's so much like what's going on now, but all they had were movies and and the goddamn music videos on the MTV. You know what I mean? So it's really interesting, but it's like watching Remy, played by Michael Rappaport, watching his character arc is a silly dramatization. In all fairness,
in
but
90s movie classic style.
yeah, in 90s movie classic style. But it like is really what I think about when I think about like how easy it is to take someone that is like, tofu.
Yeah.
A clean slate at that point, not a completely clean slate, but some kid who just like doesn't know who they are, they can easily be tipped one way or another.
Right.
There were lots of kids, from my era that were easily duped into hair metal. I still feel some residual guilt from that era.
Well, dude, I mean, I got caught up in
It's true.
I mean, I got caught up in I wouldn't say I got caught up in gangs, but I got caught up in tribalist mentality. We had when I was in high school, we had a crew. It was like a skinhead and punk rock crew. It was a non-racist skinhead crew.
Sure, of course.
It was,
Yeah, the Sharps.
it wasn't even sharp. It was like, we were more interested in like the traditional like reggae skinhead type of stuff. We were more into that.
Sharp adjacent.
Yeah, sharp
Yeah,
adjacent, But and that was going on when Dropkick Murphys and then the Business were kind of having like a revitalization, and so this and Oxymoron, and so the Punks and Skins thing was really hot and in the front of the cultural consciousness at that time.
Gotcha.
It had cycled back around at that point.
Yep.
And so I got really into that world, and we had a club, and so much of it was really cool because it was this big group of friends, and it was it was multicultural, but we also all tried to adopt the same mentality, the same set of values. Like we became part of the club, and we got in a lot of fights, and we drank a lot, and we participated in acts of vandalism and hoodlumry. We got into shit.
Yeah.
And did a lot of stuff that now like I look back on and I'm embarrassed about. And I think that and in fact I know this for a fact that so much of that was motivated by just a desire to be a part of something.
Right.
And I'm hoping that the people who come to shows at Seventh Circle are finding that they don't have to get involved in that sort of thuggery.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And I mean, that's what we advocate for as well, because like you said, it's at an age where that tipping point is so steep, where any kind of influence is going to send them one way down the mountain or the other. And we've seen it. We've seen it go both ways. I mean, we've seen kids who have come in having no friends and having no just no group, no backing, no support system for what they're going through. And if we, if they can come in and they can just become a part of our community, which as long as they're not causing problems, they're welcome to come in and be a part of the community.
And even if they do cause problems,
then
it's not like, you're
done.
banished.
Yeah, exactly. And
it's all right, let's sit down and let's have a conversation about
this. Exactly. And I mean, we've certainly had to ban people here and there for infractions that
but
were,
not as much.
That were stronger.
Just like the most egregious infractions.
Right, exactly. Yeah. It wasn't anything, I mean, it's never been anything just super simple. It's obviously been, really, really bad shit.
Now, how do you find people? How do you feel people respond to that position on your part? Do you think that by and large people support you in that type of mentality of like, we're not going to out and out just like banish people right out the gate? We're going to have a conversation. Like, do you?
For the most part, I mean, we have a really good tight knit crew of the. I mean, I guess for lack of a better terminology, the like senior volunteers at Seventh Circle, and like it's kind of like a little just collaboration of us that make the heavy decisions about things like this, And I mean, anybody is welcome to be a part of those decisions if they want to be, but a lot of people are just kind of like, that's too much. I just want to work door or run sound or whatever, Like I want to contribute to the venue's existence, but like I don't have the mental energy to,
to get involved in this battle.
Deal with like banning an accused rapist, things like that.
Oh, wow.
Like
stuff
shit
to that
like,
extreme.
Dude, we deal with that shit all the time, and it's awful.
Wow.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, it's so mentally draining. And I mean, obviously, we're fostering an environment.
You deal with it often?
This year we have.
Wow.
Yeah, it's been rough.
Do you think that is more legitimate claims are coming out? Do you think that people are just more willing to talk
That's
about
what it feels
now?
like, yeah.
Or do you how much of it, like, what would you say is the ratio of like legitimate, victims coming forward, and how much is it people who are just trying to participate in kind of like the, I don't know,
cancel culture?
Yeah, I mean, people who cancel culture is not even the term that I would use. Like, have you seen any like crying wolf going on? Have you seen anything like that, or people who are just like stirring up shit? Because people do stir up shit. But would you say, for the most part, it's been primarily legitimate claims?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely.
I mean, that's a good thing that more people are talking.
Exactly. And I mean, it's not a good thing that it's happening, but I mean, it is happening all over the place.
Well,
and
the more that people talk about it, the more less it'll happen.
Exactly. And so that's honestly the absolute hardest part of being involved at Seventh Circle and running the place in the way that I do, is having to deal with those situations when they arise. And I mean, when it's obvious and when it's easy to just handle, it's just like, okay, yeah, obviously that was a situation that happened, and that person needs to not be welcome here because of that. And there's no, like, fixing somebody like that is beyond us. It's beyond our ability, and it's beyond what we should be responsible for, because it's more than, I mean, we're not licensed therapists. We're not anything like that, and so it's like,
and obviously, and also you have to worry about the safety of the people who are going to be there.
And that's first and foremost, absolutely. I mean, the number one concern is safety at Seventh Circle, and so we have to. It's like if somebody came in there with a weapon,
right? If you know somebody has a propensity towards violence with weapons, and a complaint comes up that is real enough, you're not going to let the person who carries a gun and likes to shoot people into the place.
Exactly.
You're just looking out for someone's safety.
It's the same type
of
mentality.
It's not your job to try and fix them.
Right.
No.
And I mean, that's where another line that we have to figure out how to draw, because certainly we want to welcome everybody and we want to help be an influence in that tipping point, at that point in their life where we can tip them towards a positive path. But if it's obvious that they're already going down that negative path, it's not in our realm of ability to bring them back a lot of the time.
Right. Well, you're
in
part
that
along
situation, we have to just cut ties and be like, okay, you're not healthy for this community, and you got to go.
Right.
And over the
ideally, you can catch people earlier on down the path and help them
even. And I mean, and it's hard to see exactly when that is, because if we catch them early enough on down the path and bring them back, then we don't even realize that it could have been what it became, what it could have become. We only really know that it has gotten that bad when it gets that bad.
Right.
And so when those situations arise, we have to deal with them, and that's just a part of the nitty gritty of running a place like this and keeping it safe.
Right.
And So, but what I was going to go back to was more along the lines of like the grooming of the political ideology stuff, because we've experienced that. There was one kid in particular who started coming around Seventh Circle when he was young and, got welcomed into the scene and stuff, but then like through whatever teenage drama there is, kind of ended up becoming ostracized, not by us as Seventh Circle, but by his group of friends. And all of a sudden, he just kind of stopped coming to shows because he didn't really feel welcome by his group of friends, ex-friends, whatever. And he actually ended up falling in with some of the Nazis in town.
Really?
Because they know to pick on the prey that is all of a sudden not feeling welcome in the, like, other part of the punk
You gotta
scene,
wonder where they find him.
That I don't know. That was
is there like a chat room that you go into all my friends just broke up with me and I can't go to shows anymore group? Like,
and they're like, oh, come hang out at our house.
Yeah.
But that was basically what happened, and so
I guess if you're a predator, you know how to do that.
I guess so.
Yeah.
And so he somehow found his way to hanging out with this fucking crew of Nazis in town, and it was me and one other person from Seventh Circle who were like the only two people on the light side that he had left, and we had to have an intervention with him and basically say, if you don't step back from this and realize how fucking stupid you're being hanging out with these people and like let us welcome you back into this community and turn you around, then we're gonna have to cut ties with you too, and you're not even gonna have us two left. And
how did that go?
It was enough to where he was take that step back and get out of it. And he came back around, but he was never really the same again after that. And he's not around anymore. And I mean, other stuff happened that's not really worth going into. But like, it really was heartbreaking to see that like this kid that had so much promise and so much potential found his way to that dark side.
Man, once you grab onto an idea, it's really hard to let it go.
Yeah, and I mean,
There's that saying, Carl Jung said, "People don't have ideas; ideas have people."
Ooh.
You know what I mean? So, like, once an idea possesses you, once it takes a hold of you, it's really hard to get away from it. Mm-hmm. And when you do wake up from it, it's almost like anytime you see, like, a werewolf movie, and there's always the scene where, like, they transform into the werewolf, and it's this, like super painful experience, but then they just, like, black out, and they've spent the whole time werewolfing and fucking shit up. And then they come to and they're like, what did I do?
Yeah, I'm a human again.
What did I do? I'm a human again. And they just, like, when you've been possessed by ideas or you've been possessed by an identity, even more than an idea is the identity that is the entity of the idea, etymologically speaking.
That's it. Yeah, it's exactly what it is.
The entity of the idea that is created as a result of an idea that gets in your head. Mm-hmm. Like, detaching oneself from that once you've taken it on so fully and it's become part of your body, it's like, kind of like like Reagan from The Exorcist having scars on her face for the rest of her life because of being possessed by Satan. You know what I mean? It's one of those type of things.
Yeah.
Man, and it's so crazy to shake loose, man.
Yeah, and it's hard to see it happen because, that's not the only experience that we've had with kids kind of going wayward and us not being successful in bringing them back. And
that's a really tough thing. Mm-hmm. So you mentioned the discussions that you guys have between you and the volunteers. Mm-hmm. So pretty much everyone defers to you as the final word, correct?
Not always.
Not always?
There have definitely been situations, certainly not like god-awful things like that, but like there have been situations where like kids that I was friends with in the community have committed some sort of infraction, and it's like I said, it's not ever been a point of contention when it was anything as drastic as something terrible like going to the Nazi house or like being a sexual assaulter or whatever. Like,
but it can be
those are always cut.
It can
dry.
Be going and spray painting on the building. It's lighting off fireworks. It can be
that's
everything along the spectrum.
Well, yeah, and I mean those are like the very low end of the spectrum because like that's obviously just like, hey, quit fucking doing that. Do you want this place to keep existing? Because you're not helping.
Right.
If you're vandalizing the neighbor's
and
building
everything in between though. Is
right.
What
exactly.
I'm saying.
And so somewhere in between, there have definitely been instances where people that I was friends with, did something and it was frowned upon by the community, but me being such a close friend with them, it was hard for me to have a voice in there that was unbiased.
You couldn't have objectivity.
Yeah, exactly. And
so
I
you
was
deferred to the
I deferred
community.
to the, well, I mean, we all defer to each other. We all defer to each other for big decisions like this, but there have definitely been instances
really cool.
here and there where I'm like, you know what? I'm too close to the people in this situation, and I see both sides of it, and I feel like this is something that they need to work out together. But if they're not willing to do that, then I have to defer to you guys.
Situational management.
Exactly. For like the final decision, and I will back it, whatever it is. But it's too hard for me to make because I see how this could be solved a different way, and I'm too close to the people involved.
Wow.
And so there have been a few situations like that over the years where, you know, I had to just
basically
be the
yourself,
messenger of what the decision was, you know.
So
it's like sometimes I'm just the judge and not the jury.
Right.
But sometimes I have to be the judge and the jury and the executioner, and that's the hardest part, you know.
God, how do you keep doing that for 7 years straight, man? Because you're like married to that place.
Yeah, I know. Honestly, and I've thought about this a lot more recently because we've been dealing with some really, really difficult situations in the last few months. And somebody else asked me, like, how do you keep going? What motivates you to keep taking this on? And really what it is it's the overwhelmingly positive impact.
Well, it's bigger than yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And so what I look to, you know, especially when it's like I'm at home at night and I'm like in my head about all this bullshit that we're having to deal with or whatever. And it's like it's never gotten to the point where I'm just like, fuck this, I want to quit. Like it's never gotten to that point.
You don't get Alaska thoughts?
No. I mean, I'd like to vacation to Alaska. That'd be nice. But no, I've never thought about just walking away because because the overwhelmingly positive impact that we have had on so many people.
And you really have.
That I have witnessed and experienced firsthand is absolutely enough for me to continue to just put my head to the grindstone and keep going.
Right.
Because I know that is absolutely more important than any one of us and then myself and then any negative shit that I might have to deal with. It's so important to just deal with it because if we don't, then we will crumble and fall apart, and then all that positivity that we affect on people will cease.
Right.
And I think about the individuals who have told me that I saved their lives. I think about the bands that I love that wouldn't exist if I hadn't done what I've done to continue to book these shows at the bare minimum and operate this venue at the bare minimum in the ways that I contribute to it, and just continue to day in and day out foster this community that creates the environment that these kids thrive in, you know?
Right.
And I mean, so many of my favorite bands and my closest friends are people that I know because they started coming to Seven Circle when they were of the age that they needed to, and they experienced what they needed to in order to become the functioning individuals that they are now as they've gotten older, you know? And I mean, especially being open 7 years now, like we've had kids that started coming when they were 14 that are 20 now.
Right.
And
you've taken them through all of high school.
Exactly. And for the first time, we're experiencing the first kind of generation of kids that really started coming when they were that age, and now they're 20, 21, whatever they are. And
they're adults, and they're going into the world, and they're different people because of where you were during their formative
years. And they have
years.
been very vocal about that to me.
That's
what
gotta be
keeps
so
me going.
rewarding,
It is.
man.
I mean, that reward in and of itself is absolutely what keeps me going through all of the hardships that come along with this as well.
That's amazing.
And it's every single time. I mean, you know, it's happened multiple times with multiple people, and it's so just. Even though I'm very aware of the impact that I have on people and the impact that the place has on people, it's still just jaw-dropping sometimes when people will tell me, like, you know,
I'm sure it's overwhelming
this
to a
aspect.
degree.
Oh, it is, absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, they're like, this aspect of my life wouldn't exist if it wasn't for you and for Seven Circle, or this, you know, this band that I'm in that I'm super happy with and successful with.
My relationships wouldn't exist.
Exactly. Yeah.
Dude, every relationship that I have, you know, with the exclusion of my nuclear family, comes from the music scene.
Same.
You know,
I think there are 2 or 3 people from high school that I still talk to from pre-music scene Aaron.
I mean, dude, I stopped going to high school long before I dropped out.
Sure, yeah.
You know, I stopped going to I barely went to high school.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think I went to all my classes the first month of freshman year. And then after that, I was pretty much ditching every day.
Yeah.
So as far as, like, during the socialization period of my life, during the period of what made me to be an adult. It was all going to shows and being involved with bands. And we talked a little bit about this with Karen, because after she left Nashville Pussy, she got really involved with School of Rock and Girls Rock and stuff like that. Yeah. And so things like Girls Rock, School of Rock, Seventh Circle, they all share this thing in common, which is taking the positive things of that experience that so many of us were fortunate to have, and doing their best to try and trim away as many of the negative aspects in the form of, being around predatory people or being in bars around drugs and alcohol, or that there's a lot of danger that you can get exposed to in those worlds. And also incorporating the explicitly educational part of it. There's something that I thought of earlier in our conversation that I wanted to bring up is I remember there was almost a vetting process to be able to get into true underground music, people would kind of throw shade at you if they thought you were a quote unquote poser, which is the meanest fucking word I can think of for anyone who's trying to get into that world. Yeah. It's dude, we're all fucking posers, man. We're all posing as something we are not. Right. We're all posing as what we would like the rest of the world to see us as.
And what we think they're going to accept.
Right. So you need to drop that shit from your fucking vocabulary, man. That's just, I saw someone put a post up recently, and I wouldn't know who to attribute the credit to, but it was something like that kid in the jeans and the Nikes with the, who doesn't have any of the band stuff yet. That was you when you first showed up too. So put your arm around them and bring them into the fold and pick them up when they fall and put them up on stage and help them become somebody, you know. And so what I've noticed is when I was a kid, there was a lot more of that vetting process, and there was a lot more of that, catching shade and being treated like a poser when you were you had to really prove yourself to get somewhere.
It's is this kid cool enough to be in the club?
Yeah, you got to prove yourself on the streets, and so much of that is what led to my abuse of alcohol. Right, and so much of that is what led to antisocial behavior that I participated in order to prove myself, in order to be something other than this suburban white kid who really just wanted to go to rock shows and have friends. Right. And things like School of Rock and Girls Rock and Seventh Circle Music Collective, they are deliberately creating this environment where it's hey, you're already welcome. You're already allowed to be here. We already accept you just based upon your interest. And while you're here, we're also going to teach you some of the things that you might want to know in order to thrive in this world. Right. Whereas when you're getting into underground stuff where there's more of that vetting process, information is a little harder to come by. Help people grow and thrive in it as quickly and optimally as possible. Yeah. I just think that that's fantastic because it cuts out all the fucking bullshit. Right. Man. And all the stuff that doesn't even really matter. Right. Everyone that I've been friends with since those old days has changed in some way. Yeah. Is not the person that I met way back then. Right. So it's we weren't all the same people when we walked in. We're definitely not going to be all the same people when we come out on the other side. So why don't we just make room for that in the interim when we're together? Exactly. You know what I mean? Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's absolutely the mantra that we go by is just total acceptance. Unless you're causing a problem so egregious that you have to leave.
Right. Unless you're making it unsafe for other people.
Right. Exactly.
I used to have this rule. Simple. I used to have this rule at Three Kings when I worked there. When I started managing over there, my practice was pretty much and the rule that I set for myself, the protocol that I set for myself was I treat this like a party at my house. It's you're welcome to show up and hang out, as long as we're open, as long as the doors are open and the party's going, you're welcome to come in and hang out. If you cause any problem that makes my other guests uncomfortable or disrespects my home, or causes damage to my home, we're going to have a conversation. And if after that conversation you still can't control yourself or you're still bugging my guests, I'm going to ask you to leave. If you in any way terrorize or harm my guests, you're going to be asked to leave and never to come back.
Right.
And I think that's it might be an oversimplification, but I
mean, that sounds like it. That's pretty much
I think it applies.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the very short version of it, and it doesn't need to be longer than that, really.
No.
That oversimplification, if anything, is perfect because, I mean, sure, every situation is going to have nuances, but it all boils back down to that.
Right. Now, you mentioned something. I would like to know a little bit more about the actual process of decision making that goes on between you and the other and the volunteers.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys have regular meetings? Do you
Yep.
guys so what does that look like? Tell me about that a little bit.
So we do. It's usually about once a month or sometimes every 3 weeks. We'll have a meeting, just a volunteer meeting, and it's everybody who's a volunteer is welcome to show up. We have the Facebook forum, and we have a website forum as well that's just for the people who have signed on to be volunteers.
Right.
And that
How many active volunteers do you have right now?
It fluctuates. I mean, we have about 300 in the actual website forums as far as people who have accounts and who have said at one point or another, I want to be involved in helping this space exist. Right. At any given point, it feels like there's maybe 40 or 50 of us who are actively doing things and working shows.
Wow, that's still, I mean,
which
that's
is
still a lot of people to be actively involved.
It is, but at the same time, I mean, we do 5 shows a week, and it takes 3 people at minimum to run a show. And so if nobody's double dipping, that's 15 people a week that we need.
Right.
And if it's only 40 or 50 people that are actually involved, then that is kind of overworking all of us.
So do you guys create like a work schedule, like a volunteer work schedule?
Yes. And so the way that works is everybody has the ability to sign themselves up for whatever shows they can work.
Oh, you do it like
and
a
so
sign up.
Everybody signs themselves up for whatever shows they want to come volunteer at. And the only way that we schedule anything and schedule anybody is basically every other day I'm posting in those forums saying, okay, here's the next week's worth of shows and the holes that are still in the mandatory staff
and then
positioning.
people volunteer for
and then
that.
People are prompted then to go sign up for what they're available for. And for the most part, it works out great. Usually the shows have at least the 3 minimum people.
You rarely
staffing
find
it.
yourself shorthanded?
I think we've done over 1,700 shows, and
You've done over 1,700 shows.
Yeah,
Wow.
the 7-year anniversary that we did on the day.
I mean, that makes
that
sense.
Yeah, it does. Right.
1,700, 365 times 7.
That's
numbers.
It's like 250 shows a year. Yeah.
You do 250 shows a
on
year.
average. Yeah.
That's amazing.
It's wild. Yeah.
Yeah. That's amazing.
But yeah, so out of those 1,700 shows. 1,700 plus at this point. I think we've only had like 3 or 4, maybe 5 go by completely short-staffed to where like the sound guy was also having to like collect door money from people who are coming in the garage because we didn't have a door person.
But you've never had it small enough that it just couldn't function.
No, we've never had to cancel a show
That's
because
crazy.
of lack of staff.
How are turnouts on average?
It totally depends on the bands.
It really depends
Yeah,
on the bands.
always.
Okay.
Because it's all, I mean, we're not like, we're off the beaten path. We don't have foot traffic that's showing up just because we're
But you
there.
guys don't have a built-in thing of just like a youth group where like kids are like
we do
wanting
to an
go.
extent. Yeah, there's a small group of kids that's always kind of like rotating through and growing and shrinking and growing and shrinking that is,
They're like
just-
Seventh Circle kids.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
And they're there multiple nights a week just because it's
Shout out to the
open.
Seventh Circle kids
Yeah,
that I know are probably
absolutely.
watching
Yeah,
this right now.
100%.
Yeah.
Because they're also some of the kids that become my close friends because they're
Right.
there all the time, and then they become volunteers because they realize, oh, I'm here all the time. I might as well help contribute to this place that I love, and
Right.
this place that I call my second home. And
The third place, as it's been called. You ever heard that terminology before?
No,
We strive for third place. It's something that gets used in a lot of in the service industry a lot.
okay.
It's like the restaurant I work for, part of our company language is we're striving for third place. Because first place is people's home, second place is, work or school or whatever it is, and then
Okay.
the third place that they choose to go to.
Sure, yeah, that makes sense.
That's the third place.
Totally. I
so
like that. That's good.
yeah, so you're like
We're like the second or third place for a lot of people.
yeah. Probably the second place for a lot of people because
And
so many
hey,
people go there and
sometimes
they
maybe the first, who knows?
yeah.
And those are the kids.
I
that
mean, in
it's
some
really
places,
important
yeah,
that we
I'm
keep
sure.
existing for,
Yeah.
But yeah, so we do, you know, that's all on the internet. Everybody has a website account, and they have access to the Facebook forums if they're on Facebook to sign themselves up for whatever shows they want to work. And really the only times that it has gone understaffed was generally when, like, I literally can't be there because I'm, like, working some other show or I'm out of town or something.
Right,
and
touring, because you're touring now,
because I tour a lot too, yeah. And so it's like I literally can't come save the day, and I would if I could. So, like, hey, we have 2 hours until the show. Somebody needs to step up, and almost always, you know, people do.
Somebody steps up.
And
you rarely find yourself scrambling to fill a position at the last second.
Yeah, it's at this point it's rare. I mean, we've definitely gone through bouts where it felt like every other day I was having to post, like, okay, tomorrow's show still needs all 3 people, you know, and like it. But it's gotten to a point that it's really healthy now, which is really, really nice.
Well, after 1,700 shows, I'm sure you like
would
start
hope,
to
right?
get the protocol down.
Yeah.
You know, you would think so.
But the thing too, though, is that the volunteer crew is kind of a rotating cast as well. Because
I'm sure,
you know,
yeah.
people come in when they can, when they have time, when they're 16 or 17, and they actually have the ability and the time to, like, really start
and
contributing.
then over 7 years,
and then once it gets to the point that they have to start adulting, they don't have time to volunteer all the time anymore. But
because you guys are constantly have people coming in,
turnover,
yeah,
yep, absolutely.
That's
and so
fantastic.
it feels like we're fairly consistently having new people come in from all age groups, though, you know, who are finding out about it or finding out that we are volunteer
That's
run and
amazing.
that they can come and volunteer at any point, you know. I mean, we've had the volunteer age range from, like, 14 to 60 throughout these 17 years.
Well, John Caseta is
Or
one of
7
your
years.
guys, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so after my van got totaled.
Right, yeah. You rented his van for your tour, right?
Yeah, well, because I broke it down and
I
started
brought it to you.
Yeah, you
at
did
Lost
bring
Lake.
it to me. Yes, you did.
Because I had just gotten back from a tour
Yeah.
that day.
Yeah, and well,
That van got no rest.
Well, and I originally got his info from you because after my van got totaled and I found out about John and we started renting the van directly from him, I started doing the math and I was like, man, if we had kept the van, we would have had to tour 20 dates a month in order to make it worthwhile. You know, like
just to keep the expenses covered
well,
or whatever?
Just to make it, like, I like broke it down and did the arithmetic of what I was paying total, like, because at the end of the day, after, you know, taxes and fees and gas and
Sure,
like, you know, I was paying $1,000 a month for my van.
Gotcha.
You know what I mean? You've got a really nice van outside. I'm sure that costs you quite a bit, you know, a month too. But with how little the band was touring, it made no sense for me to have it. And I broke it down and broke it down to, like, how much was worthwhile.
Sure.
And it was like, seriously, like, you would have to play 20 gigs a month to make it worthwhile.
Jeez.
So
And that's a
so it
full-time
ended up,
band.
yeah, you know what? and it made
Full-time bands don't even always do that
I know,
consistently.
right?
You know, you tour for 9 months out of the year or whatever, but, like,
right.
that's the grind.
No, but it ended up working down, like, and I mean that with what I was paying to John to use it.
Oh, sure, yeah.
You know what I mean? It was, I would have to do 20 gigs a month.
Right,
on my own
exactly.
van,
But
know
if
what
you
I
can
mean?
just rent that for one tour, then that's
I
way
mean,
easier because you don't have to worry about it the rest of the year.
Right, and so many people are doing more of the, like, weekend thing and
Yeah,
short run
yeah.
tours. You're seeing a lot more short tours happening these days, which I
Absolutely.
think is interesting. You know, it's interesting to see how the market's changed. But I want to talk about touring with you a little bit too. But I want to really quickly keep talking about the way you guys actually run your community. So do you guys have physical in-person meetings? Like, do you have a board of, I guess, a board of directors?
Not officially, no.
Not an official board of directors?
It's all very, very equal, honestly, across the board. Like, I happen to have my name on some paperwork, and I handle all the boring business stuff just because I know how to do it and because technically the business belongs to me as a sole proprietor. But, you know, in every other sense of the word, it is a collective-run establishment.
Right.
And we have, like I said, it's either once a month or sometimes every 3 weeks, depending on the availability of nights. We'll have a meeting where we'll all, anybody and everybody that's part of the volunteer collective is welcome to show up and encouraged to show up. Usually it ends up being between 10 and 20 people, which is not that many considering we have like 300 in the group. But, like, hey, who's that? People work, people have lives, people have school.
It's
not
like when
everybody can make
it's
it
like
to
when a
meeting.
community has like a zoning hearing or something like that, or like
it's
a
like
town
everybody,
hall.
please show up. But
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
whoever shows up gets to make decisions.
Right.
And so,
Like the homeowners association
Right.
is the 10 old ladies with nothing better to do.
Yeah.
with their time.
So I guess that's us. We're the 10
I
old
just
ladies.
like to hear other people talk.
But yeah,
So lonely.
so we get together and we discuss whatever issues are going on and need to be discussed, and we make decisions.
How often
about
does that
them
happen?
Once a month.
Once a month.
Once a month at least. Sometimes
Cool.
every 3 weeks if we're doing them more often. We're trying for the every 3 week model. For a while, we were going back and forth between doing like a Monday night and 3 weeks later a Sunday afternoon for the people that couldn't come on Mondays. But the Sunday afternoons just stopped being well attended at all, and so we scrapped them because they were worthless.
Right.
And we went back to just Monday nights. So it's like every 3 or 4 weeks we'll just schedule out a Monday night where we won't have a show, and we'll all get together at like 7 p.m. and talk shop.
Cool.
And if there's nothing to discuss, then we kind of know in advance, like, hey, everything's hunky-dory right now. Let's just order a bunch of pizzas and have a party. And we'll, like, throw a Nintendo up on the projector and everybody can play Smash Bros. Or something.
That's cool.
And let's not worry about the bullshit. Let's just have fun. And
Dude,
so,
it's youth group without religion.
Right,
it's
yeah, it's
fucking
really nice.
awesome,
Yeah, it's
man.
great.
Secular youth group.
Yeah.
I love it.
And so yeah, we get together, and when there are hard decisions that need to be made, we make them. And if it's a hard decision that can't wait until the next meeting to be made, then we have another forum that we have that's online that's just the like heavy decision maker people that doesn't involve like the other 200 people.
Like if it's something that needs to be urgently discussed, you
then
guys get on there.
we can get on the internet and do it now if we have to. And so
everybody just kind of has an ongoing dialogue, and you let it go as long as it needs to go, and then reach a decision.
Yeah.
And you what put it to a vote, or
sometimes it depends. It always depends on the situation, because sometimes it's like, this is very obviously how we have to handle this, but if anybody else has any other input on some sort of nuanced way that this could be handled a little differently, then speak up. There's that kind of thing. Or there's just like, hey, this person needs to be blacklisted because of this terrible thing. There's no buts about it. We just wanted all you to know. And I guess if anybody has any reason to challenge it, feel free. But usually no one does, because everybody's like, oh, yeah, no, fuck that, you know. Mm-hmm. And so so that's kind of the way that it all goes. And we have those monthly in-person meetings. But like I said, I mean, the fact that it takes 3 people to run a show means that at least every show night, there's 3 people that are together in the same room talking about how that show went or whatever. And so there's always multiple voices as far as
that's awesome.
Like what happened or what needs to happen because of this or whatever.
I feel like that kind of gets ahead of skunking too. You know what do you know what I mean by skunking?
No.
Like,
what are you referring to?
Harmful gossip.
Oh, sure.
Like when you're like standing around and you're just, going,
just talking shit.
The boss has his head up his ass.
Oh,
you know what I mean?
Like mutiny kind of skunking. I see.
Yeah. Well, not even necessarily like mutiny skunking.
Well, but like what could lead to a mutiny, if
right?
necessary.
Well, and I mean about each other. People
Right.
like
Oh,
forming
sure.
alliances, and I'm sure that still goes on to a degree.
I mean, there are certainly cliques, but it's not so much to the point where it's
I feel like it's mitigated if you
Yes.
have a public forum where people are
Right.
are able to like express their viewpoints.
Yeah. I mean, the worst thing that has ever happened as far as that goes, just within the volunteer community, is there have been people that are like, I don't really get along with that person, so I'm not going to work a show that they're working, because then I don't have to hang out with them. But that's fine. That's super easy. Like, okay, great. You can see when they're working a show. Just don't sign up for that show. You can avoid each other.
We don't all
Let's
not
have
to be
a problem.
friends.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's
I mean,
fine.
with a group of 300 people, it's inevitable you're going to have some kind of a conflict here and there.
Right.
But like, just get along. There's no reason to talk shit. There's no reason. It
seems like
to,
such a simple concept,
God, I
doesn't
know,
it?
doesn't it? Ugh.
It's like just get along.
Yeah. It's like either just avoid each other. If you can't handle each other, that's fine. We're not asking you to handle each other, Even if you're like not getting along with this person, you can run sound and they can work door, and you don't really have to interact much at all. Right. Like, those are 2 different areas of the building and areas of the show. Like,
right.
But I mean, it's been really nice because we don't have a lot of that. For the overwhelmingly most part,
it's primarily positive.
It's all positive, and everybody gets along. And I mean, the worst
and it's
of
such
it,
a positive. Like, everybody's reaping the benefits of this,
right?
Like, the positive results that you guys
exactly.
get.
And I mean, the worst of it that's ever been with people that like, there's no reason to get them out of there, is just like somebody will go, that person annoys me, so I don't want to work door with them because I don't want to hear them talk. It's like, cool, that's totally fair.
That's totally reasonable. I like to
just
say,
don't work door with them.
Right. I like to say, we don't have to be friends.
Yeah.
But we don't have to be enemies either.
Exactly. Yeah.
But we do have to. We are required to live on the same planet together.
Yeah.
We are required to be neighbors in varying degrees of relativity.
Yeah, and I
You
mean
know,
we're even part of the same community, but it's
Right.
so easy. The community is so small, but it's still big enough that you can totally exist on parallel paths with people that you don't care for.
Yeah.
And it's not hard to just avoid them and not cause conflict because of your
And not have a
grievances.
fight and not
Yeah.
have like a physical altercation.
Right.
It's a microcosm for really with the right set of guidelines how people can get along.
Yeah.
People can make it work.
Right.
It's amazing how much we've developed the capacity to be able to get along
Yeah.
too, and how much more we will see it develop over the next 100 years, hopefully.
I hope. Yeah.
Yeah. So we touched a little bit on touring.
Yeah.
You've been doing a lot more of that lately.
Actually, this year has been the slowest.
Has
in
been the
like-
slowest.
in like 8 years. I think.
So let's
Partially because my van died.
let's
but
yeah, partially because, but now you got a nice ride out front.
yeah.
So
lucky.
okay, let's give people who may not be familiar with Seventh Circle an idea of the full scope of what you guys do. You're not
Yeah.
just some warehouse space with a
Right.
stage.
Right.
You guys are a venue. You guys are a record store.
Mm-hmm.
What else do you guys offer as far as services in the brick and mortar shop?
That's about it, really. I mean, unless like we've had people come in and use it as like a film set location,
Right.
And so that's kind of cool. We also have the basement is rehearsal space,
Right.
for bands.
But then in addition, you also have like people like John who rent out, who is sort of an extension of
Sure, yeah,
of
that
Seventh
makes sense.
Circle.
Yeah.
I consider him an extension of Seventh
Right.
Circle.
And he accesses that scene and says, "Hey, I have this tour
I have
van
this vehicle
that I can offer for rent if you want to go on tour, but you don't have a reliable vehicle."
Right.
And then
He's
he
definitely
supports
one of
that
your
scene in that
proxies.
way. Yes,
He's definitely
exactly.
proxying that way.
Mhm.
So additionally, you do tour managing and driving, right?
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about how often you do that and what that looks like for you.
So it depends on the year. On average, it's usually been between 3 or 4 times in a year, and it's usually between a week and 3 weeks per tour.
Mhm.
So it's never been, I mean, with one exception, it's never been anything like astronomically long or that takes me away from Seventh Circle for a long time. But it's, like you said, it's kind of an extension of Seventh Circle and in the way that
part of
you
the
know,
universe of what you guys do.
Right. But it's a cool kind of just next step for a lot of bands because we give a lot of bands their first show, their first experience playing live, their environment to make mistakes and learn from them and learn how to conduct themselves as a live band from
That's
everything
fantastic.
from everything from like just simple things as like stage presence or
So it's
like
mostly
how to sing
working
into a
with
microphone.
younger new bands?
Not mostly, but
a lot of it
But a
has
lot
been.
of it is, yeah.
That's fantastic.
And so it's things like that, but it's all the way up to simple little things that you wouldn't even know until you get into the situation. Like, hey, build your drum kit in the staging area before you load onto the stage because you only have 7 minutes.
Small stuff.
The half of the changeover you have to set your drums up and sound check and go. You're not going to have time to unfold all your stands and put all the cymbals together and put everything together on stage. And if you do that, you're going to push the whole show schedule like 20 minutes behind.
Right.
And like kids just don't even know this as a concept
Right.
until they're in it. And so it's been really cool to kind of just be the breeding ground for that to where like, it's like, yeah, this is how you do it. This is why we have you load in an hour before you play so you can set your drums up
That's
outside.
fantastic.
And then move them onto the stage all completely built instead of dragging your, trap case onto the stage with all your gear in it completely put away.
Right.
And, then when those bands get big enough or good enough to where they're getting the attention of the bigger promoters in town and they're getting to open shows at the Marquee or the
They're
Bluebird
already
or whatever,
pro as fuck.
they know what they're doing and they're
Right.
not going to mess that up by, oh, I didn't build my drum kit yet. It's like, well, tough shit. You got to play in 6 minutes, so you better get cracking. you
Right,
know?
right.
Like,
Man, I had the so when I first is by training, I do have a designation as a coach.
Okay.
All right. So I have some training in that regard and a trainer.
Cool,
You
yeah.
know what I mean? As someone who could set up trainings. And so early on after I completed some of my certifications, I had this idea to create a like in the van training
oh, yeah.
type like where there's a tour training type of thing where it's
Sure.
like while
A
we're in the
simulation.
van. Well, because think about how long you're in the van.
oh, God, the dynamics, yeah. They're,
With
the
how
charts.
long you're in the van, obviously I wouldn't
I mean,
want
if
to
you
cut out
do,
the
if
part
you
of
do
just
like a week-long tour, then what's, 7 times 7?
Yeah.
42?
Yeah.
You're
42
in the van
hours,
for 42 hours in a week
Right.
with other people.
And if you had the ability to do this, now you would need to do it so that people aren't up all night partying and are getting decent sleep and aren't sleeping all day in the van, because you would want people to be awake in the van.
Yeah.
But I had this idea of like building a van, like retrofitting a van specifically as a mobile training facility.
Yeah.
So like you have like a monitor hooked up and you're able to like show like PowerPoint presentations and videos and stuff like that, and like give exercises to the bands, like help them develop their vision, their values, their like help them kind of develop their mission statement as a van, help them develop the culture side of their van.
Yeah.
Because I really do feel that, like, I think of it like an old wagon on the Oregon Trail, you know? Your wagon is going to get a lot further, a lot faster if all the horses are pulling in the same direction.
Right.
And if they're all pulling in different directions, it's just going to rip the wagon apart.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So I feel like
And I mean, you're right, because the only real tour drama I've ever experienced came from people just getting annoyed with each other in that close proximity of the van.
Right.
Because they had not done it before to that length and didn't
Right.
really,
Right.
grasp how to handle it.
Right. It's
Like
the
that
ultimate
training would be
team building
amazing. Yeah,
experience.
absolutely.
You know, one thing that is kept. I also had this idea to write a relationship book, like a self-help book.
Yeah.
For bands.
For bands, yeah.
And it would be
Because
all
it's like a 5-way marriage.
Well, dude, and it would be all the ruckus guys on the front with like sweaters and turtlenecks, like hugging each other in front of a fire, you know, and it would just be like present it like a relationship guide.
Yeah.
Because so much of our ability to quote unquote make it, so much of our ability to survive in this world is dependent on perseverance, sustainability,
Right.
like
Consistency.
treating it like a marathon, not a race.
Right.
You know what I mean? It takes a long time. Stamina.
Yeah.
You've got to have that stamina and endurance, and you're not going. The thing that's going to help you endure when things suck, because they inevitably will suck, is that friendship. And the only thing that has kept my band together as long as it has is the fact that the dudes in my band are my best friends, and I love traveling with them.
Right.
You know, when I was sitting down with Blaine Cartwright the other day, he mentioned a few times how much he loves just traveling and playing rock and roll with his friends.
Yeah.
He's like, there's nothing like it in the world. It's
There's
better
not.
than sex. It's better than booze. It's blah, blah, blah. Like, even to hear him say that, which is something that I've been saying forever,
Yeah.
which was like, you know, he's like, he just talked about how there's nothing, it's the most addicting thing in the world to be able to just travel and do that. If you could create an environment where like everybody is not only learning how to be a band, but you're also learning how to be together.
Yeah.
You know, how to, like, man, the reason that I kind of turned away from it is just because I was having trouble getting people interested in it. You know, I especially like punk rock and like and metalhead types, I think are a little they're a little resistant, a little adverse to the idea of some guy who comes in like, hey, I'm a coach and trainer, and I'm going to teach you how to be in a rock and roll band. Come with me on my 7-day,
they just want to do it.
You know, retreat. They're like,
You can't tell me nothing, man.
Yeah.
nah, man, I just want to go out there and be wild on the road, and that makes it impure and some sort of like fake corporate bullshit, man. Fuck your mission statement. I remember I was having a conversation with Tom from Native Daughters several years ago, and I love Tom Chigoy.
Oh, he's great.
He's a great dude. And we were sitting at Streets of London one night having a drink, and we're talking, and I was talking about how much I loved Valiant Thor.
Yeah.
Because they have a mission statement.
Yeah.
I was like, I think that's great, dude.
That
like
band
they're
is so good.
Dude, they're one of my favorites.
I love them.
And their fans are just so like loyal and like fanatical, and just like when you're a Valiant Thor fan, dude, you're like, I'm a Thor here, dude.
Yeah.
Like I fucking love that.
Own
band.
it, yeah.
Dude, yeah. And I think that so much of that is because they have this vision for what they wish to accomplish in the world as a band. or at least they were very explicit about that early on in their career.
Yeah.
You know, even though it was, you know, this absurd thing of like we come from within the planet Venus to like help, you know, the people of Earth like better themselves and like, you know, achieve a higher enlightenment, you know, like it was kind of this crazy thing, but it was and presented in this like cartoonish comic book kind of way, but it was really fun.
Yeah.
And I remember like they're like, we're stranded here on Earth, but we're trying to help people, like, you know, that was their thing.
Yeah.
And I was talking about that with Tom, and he just goes, see, I hate that. He was like, when I hear the word mission statement, I think of my fucking job, and I think of mission statements, and I think of and all this bullshit. Like it rang these like very Office Space-esque bells for him.
That's so funny.
And I think that there is a resistant in the DIY world. It's fascinating to me because there's this resistance to those type of ideas, and
I'm not going on your punk rock retreat, man.
Yeah. Like they're like, no, man, fuck that. You know, it needs to be pure, and it's, you know, and it's for the art and la la la. And like when you start throwing words like marketing and things like that at people, or mission statements, or values, or vision, or have people, you know, write down their goals or anything like that.
Let's talk about developing your story.
Right. It all reeks is very new agey and very corporate. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I had a little trouble selling people on that idea, and understandably so. But the fascinating part is to me is that I think that artists, creative people, are like the most potent source of positive energy in the world. You know, they have so
100%.
They have so much of, like, I've heard this analogy of this metaphor of the water in the conduit, like, which is that everyone possesses the water inside of them. You know, everyone possesses the essence inside of them, but different people have a different conduit to dispense that water,
right?
That essence, you know what I mean? And really artistic and talented and really creatively driven people, and people who've honed that skill, have, it seems like, more robust conduits to be able to express that to the world, you know? Or you think about like all this potential energy, and I just think of like, if you took all that potential energy and you focused it, like, you could make it into whatever the opposite of a death ray is. You know what I mean? A life ray.
Yeah.
You know, aim that at the planet, and fucking you could change the world.
Yeah.
The positron, man.
The positron, dude.
Yeah.
And like, I feel like if you were able to master some of the corny and mundane behind the scenes stuff, like really getting unified on the direction you want to go as a band, really getting unified on your vision for what you want to do, like sitting down and having a conversation about your goals and your dreams and what you share in common, like all that corny stuff. I feel like if bands take the time to do that, it's going to make them more apt to be able to focus that energy and really make the most impact, which is what they purport to want to do in the first place.
Exactly. And I mean, they also, you know, they deserve and they need and they want success as well.
Right.
You know, I mean, not every band is trying to just get big enough to play stadiums, but everybody wants the band to be successful enough to where
it sustains
they're out
itself,
there playing music and getting to do it without struggling too much to do it, you know? Like, and yeah, to be sustainable.
And
least,
impacting
to at least
people.
Cover itself as far as a financial standpoint goes. And, you know, at the bare minimum, you know, and
feeling legitimized, you know,
right.
for what they're doing.
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, that whole thing, you know, it sounds like a great idea, but I absolutely see where you're coming from, where people will be like, nah, fuck that, I just want to do it.
I'm not doing that.
You know, like, I just want to hop in the van, actually, with my friends and go drive across the country and do it for real. And I never even thought about, like, you know, what you're asking,
doing it deliberately.
Yeah. It was just like, it was like a byproduct, you know.
Right. Mentoring was a byproduct.
Right.
I'm talking
For
about
me,
going out there deliberately with the intention of mentoring.
Right. Exactly. And I mean, to an extent, there's that mentality now for me, but only because it has become the routine that presented itself.
Well, and it's a continuation of the organic value structure that you already have in place with Seventh Circle.
Right, but the thing that's interesting is that I've been touring since before Seventh Circle.
Well, then, so Seventh Circle is an extension of that.
In a way, yeah. But in the way that you're saying, though, is like when it first started, it was just exactly that simplified thing of like, oh, I like this band. This band wants to go play shows across the country. I have a van and I know how to travel properly.
Right.
So like, why not do this together? And then I get to see them play every night and they get to do a tour. Like that was it. That bare minimum was the mentality to begin with. And then it just kind of grew into this thing after the first several tours where I was like, okay, I know how to do this well. I know how to be in charge of it, and I know how to kind of like pass on that knowledge to these bands so that they can then do it on their own without me once they, you know, I'm kind of like the Mary Poppins of the DIY touring world is the analogy I've come up with. I'm just like, you know what? I'll take you on the first couple of tours. And
has anyone seen my bass guitar? He opens up a carpet bag and where's the drum kit?
It's also in the carpet bag, all put together already.
The band's in the carpet bag. Everybody hop on Aaron Saye's umbrella.
Yeah. But it's been really cool, though, to see that actually be something that happened without it organically being what I was trying for, though. And that was kind of what caused me to realize that that's the position that I'm in. Because I would do, like, I did the first couple of tours with Wayfarer. I don't know if you know them, the black metal band. And, you know, it was like because of those tours that they ended up getting signed to the first label that they were on.
That's amazing.
And all it was at the bare minimum was like, oh, we're a band. We have an album that we self-released. We want to go on tour. And I was like, cool. I like you guys as people and I like your music. Let's go on tour together because I have a van. And it just was this organic thing of like, this is going to be fun. We're going to be a bunch of friends that go hang out on the road for a week. And then
it's amazing.
It became, yeah, exactly. It is. And it just so happened to cause them to get signed to this label. And then, you know, I did the next tour with them, and then after that, they bought their own van, and then they, you know, went off and did it on their own, and I kept doing it, but with other bands.
I have nothing more to teach you.
Right, exactly.
Go, fly
away, my pretties. Yeah, exactly. And so it kind of became this thing where I was like, I like this analogy, you know? And I mean, certainly, like, if they still want, like, any time that I want to and have the availability, I always have an open seat in their van. They've always told me this, and they always wish I could come with them, but like now it's not necessary for the tour's success for me to go with them, and so they're often doing it, and I have other things that I'm doing now, you know, and so it's like I don't have the time or whatever. As much as I would love to hop back into the van with those guys because they're fantastic, you know, it just timing-wise it hasn't worked out again since the second tour, but I've been able to recreate that endeavor so many times with so many different bands and take them on.
How many tours would you say you've done? Especially, wait, so how many tours do you think you've done total?
Close to 40.
Close to 40?
Mm-hmm.
That, you know, that's interesting you give that number because I just told Tony the other day, I was like, at best, we probably have 40 tours left in us. Like,
left.
Left.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
And I've already done 40.
Well, because, no, I just mean like, I was like, if we go all the way to the end, and the mean age that the four of us live to be is in our 80s, and we tour all the way up until the end, and we only go on tour once a year,
40 more years.
We've got 40. We've got
That's
like 40 more tours left.
That's true.
You know, when you start breaking things
That's
down
interesting.
arithmetically, it really helps you get your priorities. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
You better get to work, buddy.
Yeah, I know, right? So, but that's interesting that you say that. So, out of the 40 tours that you've done, what percentage would you say have been first-time tours with like taking someone out and showing them the ropes?
Between 30 and 35, maybe.
Really?
Yeah.
Most of them.
Most of them. I mean, the exceptions.
Wow.
The exceptions lie in the bands that I toured with multiple times, which has only been a handful.
Right.
And it's been great though because it's like. That it's when that magic happens where it's like this is not only like are they learning everything they need to from this experience and from me as somebody that's done it before, we also click so well that in particular like this tour feels like it's the best one I've ever done, and they're just like, this is amazing, and we all get along with you so well too. Like we want you to come with us on every single one, regardless of if it's your vehicle or not. You know, when you find someone on the road that you really get along with, there's nothing like it. There's nothing like it. No, especially when it's someone outside the van, or outside the band. Yeah, because it's like. And fuck, I'm lucky, man, we really need a merch person. We really need a driver. We really need a TM. We really need a front of house part. We need somebody to come help us. But it's like, God, how are you going to find the person that you get along with that can also do all of those things properly?
Yeah,
dude,
that is super rough.
It's so hard to find sometimes. Yeah.
You know what I have found,
I've been really lucky to be that person for so many bands. It's been super cool.
We always refer to that person as our special guest star. And we have been fortunate that most of the special guest stars we've had have been great.
Good.
Really, the only conflict I can remember having is we had special guest stars that didn't get along with each other.
Oh, yeah.
And we haven't had that happen since early on.
Good.
We did have an incident where we had to drop a guy off in another town because basically 2 of the other special guest stars on the tour would not stop bullying this guy just because he was. I mean, because in all fairness, he was kind of a chode. In all fairness, I mean, this is years ago.
Yeah.
This is like when Jordan Maliba was still Stag and was in our band. This is like probably 2000, something like that. Long.
So this is still fourth-year freshman days.
Still fourth-year freshman days. So long time ago. Like before we even knew how to like go about touring properly, we were just kind of showing up places and being morons. You know what I mean? Like,
well, that's how we all start.
Really doing it badly. But we did a tour once, and we had this guy that we had found online, and he claimed that he was with some label and had all these contacts and wanted to help us out and stuff. And he like flew out to Denver and like rode with us, and we just brought a couple friends of ours and the guy was kind of a chode, and whereas being in a band forever, we've learned to be a bit more diplomatic. Our other 2 special guest stars were not as delicate in their dealings with. We're not as tolerant, and we just got sick of the conflict, so that we ended up dropping the guy off somewhere else, and he went home. But for the most part, you know, every time we've had a special guest star, even in times like our buddy Jan that we've had on the show from Belgium, we met him for the first time in Germany when he was coming with us to go on tour. And the first couple nights, we were at the Weltturbo-Jugendtage in Hamburg, so it was a big Turbo-Jugend party, so he was partying really hard.
Yeah.
So we saw Party Jan, and we're hanging out, and he was kind of a wild man, you know, and, you know, he was letting his mustache down, you know, he was having a good time. And I remember at the very beginning, early on, being like, hearing from, you know, a couple of the guys being like, dude, is this guy going to be a dud? Is this going to be a problem? Like, we don't know this guy. Is it going to work out? But then that was it. That was the one conversation. And after that, it was like, now, because we went on tour together, we became the best possible friends.
Yeah.
And it's interesting if you can get past the initial storming that happens within groups, and you can learn to get along.
Right.
You know, you can find that you build these deep relationships with people you might not normally develop relationships
100%,
with.
absolutely.
You know what I mean? And people that you might not agree with all the time on things, but they're still like, oh yeah, that's my buddy so and so. You know, I wouldn't live with him, but I sure like hanging out with him, and I think he's funny, and I think he's a good guy.
Sure,
you know, that type of thing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, some of the absolute closest and deepest friendships I have are from people that are in bands that I've gone on tour with, because you have that nonstop, really, really emotionally intense time together for so long.
Right.
And then it's over. And then there's like that post-tour depression and fallout that sets in, because it's just like, oh my God, I'm not waking up next to those other 4 people right now. Like, oh, what? Where are they? You know? Yeah, exactly. And so, you know, we combat that by making a point to get together and hang out as a group, or, you know, just maybe one-on-one, even still, like whatever, just because I'm not a part of the band. You know, it's like an extra step to just go, okay, well, I'm not seeing you every night at practice or every, you know, week or whatever it is. Like, let's make an effort to continue to hang out and like continue to keep this friendship strong.
I used to kind of make the comparison as I was like, it's the opposite of prison. It's the exact opposite of prison. Like, when people go to prison and they get out, they're kind of like, they need to reacclimate to being in society. They need to readjust. Like, they're institutionalized, right? And when you go on tour, you're almost de-institutionalized.
Yeah, and then when you come back, you have to re-enter the real world.
You have to re-enter.
The other side.
You have to re-enter the real world, where it's like, man, my entire focus for the last 2 weeks, month,
whatever it is,
whatever. My entire mission was making the show run every night. It was selling merch. It was having fun. It was going from one town to the next and seeing all these things. It was like making jokes with my buddies, you know, seeing the world, experiencing new things, meeting new people. And now it's like, so what's been going on since I left? Oh, I went to work.
Yep. Went to school.
We went to the bar. I got really wasted a few times. You know, it's like
wow, I didn't miss anything.
Yeah, and it's like, and also like not having that person right next to you to crack jokes with, and it's like you experience legitimate depression and anxiety from being disconnected from the umbilicus, you know, from the community, the commune that all exists in that van or on the bus or whatnot, and a lot of times, you know, we have friendships that we've formed that are people that I, you know, if I ran into, I would still love to see them, and we still keep in touch on social media and whatnot, but there's a very good chance we will never hang out again.
Yeah.
You know, there are bands that we've gone on tour with where the end of the tour means the end of the at least direct relationship.
Sure.
It means that is probably the last time we will be in one another's physical presence. And many times there will be things where like you're in that person's physical presence again, but you're not in the same context.
Right.
So like the relationship is different. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh yeah, I've experienced that too.
It's crazy, man.
And I've been really lucky that most of the tours that I've done, everybody that has been in the bands, you know, or been on tour, like the special guest star, like you were talking about, you know, like we've had a few of those too. And for the most part, even though that context is different when we run into each other at a show, or, you know, I'll go see the band play, but I'm not working the show because I'm not on tour with them. I'm just there, you know, like even still, even given the difference in context there and the fact that it's not a tour, things still kind of revert back to the same old mentality of like, oh, this feels like we're on the road and we're still doing good, you know, like everybody's still feeling normal with each other, and like that awkwardness, I've been lucky to not experience it very often. But like you were saying, I mean, there's certainly been times where like you'll do a run where you're out with another couple of bands, and those are the people that like next time you see them, it's just gonna be like, oh yeah, I remember you. But like you know, but like the people that you're in the van with, for sure, I've been lucky enough that I've continued to keep most of those relationships very well cultivated.
Well, and another unique thing that happens as a result of technology, which is something that I've observed, which is you are not okay. Just like human beings are unable to really maintain more than 150 relationships at a time.
Yeah.
Social media algorithms are kind of designed to work the same way.
Yeah.
So, let's say you go on a tour with someone. Their stuff is going to be showing up in your feed more. You're going to be showing up in their feed more.
Yeah.
But then as time goes on and we continue to live our lives, that gets saturated a little bit. It gets diluted a little bit, and you start to see less and less about that person, and you start to hear less and less from that person as the pool, like, you're really only going to see in your feed the people that you engage with the most.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So even our ways of keeping in touch after the fact start to kind of fade to the periphery of the social panorama.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Gordo, you're getting ready to go on tour.
Correct.
When are you leaving on tour?
Friday.
Let's do a quick plug for your tour, man. Tell people where you're going and where they can see you, and what's going on. Talk about the tour a little bit, man.
Granny Tweed is heading out on their Ape Shit Mood Ring tour.
Yeah, promoting the record, dude.
Yes, Friday night in Kearney, Nebraska at the other side.
Right on.
Saturday night in Milwaukee at Walker's Point Music Hall.
Sunday night.
Let's
go through the whole itinerary.
Yeah, let's do it.
Chicago. The Burlington with the Blind Staggers.
Are you doing this all by memory right now, or are you reading off your thing?
This is all I can remember, just that.
Dude.
Yeah, it's like a little 2 week thing.
It's hard to memorize an entire tour sometimes.
It's a 2 week thing. You know, we're doing some Halloween shows up in Eau Claire.
Oh, cool. That'll be fun.
That'll be fun. And then working our way back down. It's a really weird route. This time we're going as far north as Eau Claire, and then coming down to Austin, Texas, and playing with Randy at his residency, and then coming back up to play Larimer Lounge on the 7th for our record release show. So
cool.
It's a tour, man. It's a tour.
What shows are you most excited for?
Every single one.
So make sure
Correct
you
answer.
come out to the shows because all of them are going to be once-in-a-lifetime experiences.
I get to
It is
see a bunch of fun friends.
Yeah, that's the best part.
Yeah, that is the best part.
You know, it would be great if every show was a sellout, but...
Oh, that's not going to happen in my band.
Dude,
But I mean, as long as you've got good friends in every town, it makes it all worthwhile.
you know what? The last time we went up to the Pacific Northwest, on paper, it didn't go well.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
we talked about that when you got back from that tour.
on
yeah.
paper, it didn't go well, but experientially, you know, and I wish I'd been
It's
able.
hard you can't even quantify that.
You know what?
it's
And I
so-
wish I'd been able to distance myself a little bit more from the disappointments because I feel like I might have missed out on some
yeah,
things as a
for sure.
result. But on a positive light, we did the whole thing with the Blind Staggers, so I got to go on a vacation with my friends for a week. You know, that was the first and only time my brother and I did a tour together. You know, and I know that meant a lot to him. I've heard from multiple friends of his who are like, you know, that tour really meant a lot to your brother, and he had a
Cool.
good time, and he
Oh,
wouldn't
that's
stop
great.
talking about it. So I'm really glad we had that experience
Yeah.
together. And then as far as the shows go, attendance really wasn't great at any of them. Like maybe the one that we did, that the main one that it centered around, the Ruckus Records one we did with Big John Bates at Slim's in Seattle. That one was pretty decent. You know, I mean, it was a fun show. It wasn't like sold out or anything, but it was a pretty good crowd. And we got Airbnbs pretty much every night, and we all stayed in the house together. And it was
being well rested is a huge part of
It's
being
such a
able
huge
to
part,
actually go
yeah.
out and do that night
Make or
after
break.
night. Yeah.
Dude, and if everybody kicks in and gets the Airbnb, that's the fucking way to go, dude. Or everybody kicks in and gets a hotel. Like, a good night's sleep is like, I wish I could go back and just teach that to myself
Yeah.
again. And be like, dude, you need to make a good night's sleep a priority.
Yeah.
Because everybody's going to perform better. Everyone's going to get along better. Everyone's going to feel better.
Yep.
The shows are going to go better. You know, if you're staying up all night drinking to pass out and then sleeping on someone's floor and getting suffocated by their cat, or staying up all night partying and then getting in the van, like you're fucking yourself up for the whole rest of the trip, and you're fucking yourself up for the whole reason you were out in the first place,
right.
you know?
Mhm.
But we were getting Airbnbs together, and both bands all kicked in on it, and we're like going to the grocery store and getting stuff and cooking
Yeah,
meals
cool.
together. It's like, so on paper it was a failure.
Sure.
It was an abject failure.
Sure, yeah.
You know, but
you're investing in yourselves.
Right.
and investing in creating valuable, you know, innumerably valuable, what would you say, creating priceless experiences that will,
Yeah.
you know, may not ever happen again.
Absolutely.
And, you know, with one person that was on that tour in particular, it will never happen again.
Right.
And so my only regret is that I wasn't able to be more present with the things that I was grateful for, and I was kind of bemoaning some of the things I was annoyed about at the time.
It's hard. It's a hard line to toe when
Yeah.
you're a band dad.
Well, it's
Yeah,
like we've
it's
talked
rough.
about. We talked about a bunch of times. Gordo is the band dad is the person in the band who suffers the most. You know,
Yeah, because that's what you're always thinking. You're thinking about the bottom line. You're thinking about
well, and
like,
how much work you put in to make it happen.
Yeah,
It's not
exactly.
like it's
Yeah,
not
the
like just
opportunity
like
cost
book
and all that.
right, and it's not something as like if you book a vacation. Like my wife and I, we sat down and we planned this vacation and we went on a little tour around the Southwest, and it all went according to plan because our only intention was to go on a tour of places and sit and relax.
Yeah.
But when you put so much energy into the booking and promotion and everything that goes into trying to make it a success, and you do everything you can think of to make it work, and it still just doesn't do what you want it to do,
Yeah.
you know, that hurts.
Yeah.
You know, that's a long way to fall.
Right.
Dude, we're literally we have a backdrop for our record that we may not actually get by the time we go out on the road. So you know, things like that.
Yeah.
Did you talk to the Midnight Visuals guys?
Actually, no, we got that taken care of.
Oh, you did.
But the problem is that we don't have we may not have a record to go along with our backdrop.
oh my fucking God! Really?
Yeah,
Why?
we're
What's
gonna
happening?
have the CDs for sure. I'm not sure if we're gonna have the
Oh,
records.
you'll have the CDs though.
Yeah, we'll at least have those. But that
Nobody's buying CDs. Though.
that kind
Everybody
of
wants
stuff,
vinyl.
like you know, like everybody always says, like wait until you have the merch in hand to book your tour, and it's like
It's like no, because
that
you're sitting on
is-
the merch for 6 months
that-
before you
that-
hit the road.
yeah, it's impossible to
And then
do
you're
that.
yesterday's
It's
It
news.
really
impossible.
is. Yeah, yeah, it
Well-
is. It's so impossible.
Well,
Like,
dude, it's like the release cycle on anything, like
Yeah.
the motion comic we're getting ready to drop.
mhm.
Like that thing was written, illustrated, and voiced 2 years ago. You know what I mean? And then the one that we're working on now, God, I mean, who knows when that's going to come out?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's hard.
There's songs that we're releasing now that we have literally been working on for 4 years.
Yeah,
Because it just takes
forever.
so fucking long.
I remember. I think the 4th tour I did, the band had just released a 7-inch that had 19 songs on it. They were a power violence band, and it was great.
That's awesome.
It was
Was it-
19 songs in 9.5 minutes, and it was fantastic. Yeah.
Was it
Track
Spaz?
2.
No, but they liked Spaz a lot. But I mean, you know, it was a 7-inch, so it took months to produce and everything. I think they recorded this thing in like June, and the tour wasn't until the following June. The record didn't come out until February. By then, it had been a year since they recorded it, and they were only playing one of those 19 songs still anymore because they'd moved on. And it was funny because there were kids coming out to the shows like, "Oh, you gonna play that?" And they're like, "Oh God, I don't know if I remember."
We
that
don't even
song."
know it.
Yeah, yeah. And it's just like, well, I get it. Like, I want to hear those songs again too, but like, I totally get where you're coming from. Like, you've literally been playing those songs for a year and a half already. Like,
Well, and we've
you've
moved on
You-
creatively.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like
But the record didn't
yeah.
catch up because it takes so long to produce that stuff.
It takes so
Yeah.
fucking long.
We've already decided that we're gonna put out an EP without ever playing the songs live next time.
Yeah.
Like, that's just how we're gonna do it. We're not gonna play a lick of it live. We're just gonna record it all first.
Yeah. That way
And
you're
do
not
it-
tired of it by the time the EP comes out.
Yeah, and do it backwards because we've
Right.
been playing these songs for a long time.
Sure.
Which is why you should do everything that you can to support a band financially.
Yep.
Buy merch, go to shows, and back them via small monthly contribution on patreon.com/MFRuckus or patreon.com/Seventh Circle Music Club. You don't know
That
what
might
it
be
is?
our URL. I don't know.
Oh,
Yes, indeed.
Look up
I came into this unprepared.
look up Seventh Circle
to-
Music Collective on Patreon and
Yeah.
back them, man. Because
There's a link to it on the website, and the website is seventhcirclemusiccollective.org.
that's where I found you guys.
And it's a .org website, but I mean, we're everywhere. If you Google us, if you Google Seventh Circle Denver DIY or some variation of that, it'll come
It'll
up.
show up. You'll find
And
it.
the Patreon link is on the website. It's pretty easy to find.
Yeah,
so.
and we mentioned this, and this will be on the audio version of the podcast, but we didn't start the live stream yet. So I mean, it
Oh,
bears,
right. When we were talking earlier.
we were
yeah.
talking earlier about it. So I mean, it bears repeating. It's like when I see that someone I like is on Patreon, I immediately back them.
Sure. Yeah.
You know, like
because you believe in their craft.
right, and
you
I
want to support.
and
it.
I was
Absolutely.
doing research for the episode, and I went to your website and saw that you guys had a Patreon. And even though I only came in for $1 a month,
right.
you know, to me that's like I'm gonna throw my fucking coins in the jar.
Sure.
You know,
Yep.
I'm going to consistently contribute because I believe in what you guys are doing, and that's the way I look at all the people I back on Patreon.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not making it or breaking it for anybody that I
Sure.
back, but if enough people get together and
Yeah, I mean, if we get 500 people to give us $1 a month, that's
Amazing,
You know,
dude.
that's almost a third. What is that? A third of the rent?
yeah,
Almost.
like what we were talking about is basically if you guys just off your Patreon were able to get $2,000 a month,
Yeah.
that would cover all your operating expenses.
Yep. All the
And
regular stuff.
imagine what you could do with
Yeah,
that.
with everything else, with all the door money and all. Yeah, exactly.
Now that brings up another thing that I wanted to talk about, which is, so you tour with bands, and I assume that you don't charge like a fee to TM for people.
Right. And I mean,
Like you just go with bands that you like and you want to go have the experience and
it's
have
my
fun.
version of supporting their Patreon.
Right.
Yeah.
You just want to go participate in
Yep.
it. And Seventh Circle sustains itself
Mhm.
off of shows
Yep.
and record sales and donations and Patreon, right?
Yeah.
So how do you fucking live, man? How do you get by? What do you do? Like what are you doing besides Seventh Circle?
So I first off,
Which is a full-time gig.
feels like it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I will openly state first off that I'm very, very lucky enough to the point that I'm still living with my parents, and they are totally cool with that, and I'm not having
That's
to pay
awesome.
rent at home, and I am absolutely utilizing that luck to run Seven Circle in the way that I do.
Right.
And so that's a huge part of it. And I also do freelance audio and video work. And I have a regular part-time job at this super cool alternative LGBT inclusive church in Lakewood that I do sound and video for.
Cool.
There. Yeah, it's super rad. And it's like, it's non-denominational. It's like not any specific religion at all. Because like I'm not religious at all. I didn't come from a religious background or upbringing or anything.
But
this
spiritual
place,
community is
exactly,
really important.
Exactly. It's totally based in non-denominational spirituality. And whatever sort of self-worship or whatever deity you choose, like there isn't even a cross or a Bible anywhere in the building, and it's so cool, and it doesn't feel oppressive like every other church I've ever been in.
Like a non-Unitarian Unitarian.
Right? Yeah. That's That's exactly what I've heard it compared to.
That's
as,
awesome.
Yeah. And so I started working there about a year and a half ago or more. Just as an audio video guy, and it's great. Like it's a super cool environment. It's so funny. The main sound guy there is this total metalhead who's in his 40s now, but he went to like all these metal shows when he was younger, and he still does. He still goes. And I walk in for my interview. He's the main salaried audio guy there, and I walk in for my interview, and he's like, "Wait, I know you." And I was like, "Oh," and he goes, "Yeah, don't you work at like the Gothic or the Summit or something?" And I'm like, "I mean, I'm there a lot shooting video. What kind of shows are you going to?" And he's like, "Metal mostly." And I was like, "Oh, we're gonna be friends. This is gonna be great."
Yeah.
And I was just like a shoe-in for the position, and it was so much fun to just like realize that there is this community out there that is just like the most non-churchy church that I've ever experienced.
Well, I see the value of the church and the cleric in the community.
Yeah.
You know, I see the value of it.
It's just become such a homogenized, organized thing that it just went so astray in so many ways.
And so much of it has been tainted and poisoned by ulterior motives and money and greed and the rage economy, like we talked about. You watched that Wisecrack video I sent you, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It's just this interesting idea of like how the rage economy has changed, and how at one point the church was the place that you kind of went to like put all your negative feelings and things like that, and the church would store it up nice and safe for you.
There's just generally not enough touting of secular moralism out there. You know,
right.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like it's just not something that people generally talk about a lot. I mean, I guess.
Well, and I think it is. I think it's incredibly valued to have the space to go talk about abstract existential concepts.
Yeah.
You know, I think it helps to cull some of the dread that human beings feel, because there is an inherent anxiousness and an inherent fear to being alive and being a sentient organism. You know, with emergence comes this despair. You know, with self-awareness comes this despair that I feel like can be ameliorated by having a place to go have those conversations. And I think that just having the space for it is huge. And it can be daunting to just sit down with someone on the bus and talk deep philosophy.
Right.
You know, and I think that in that capacity, I think that churches and religious centers serve an amazing purpose. It's the indoctrination and the fear and hate mongering that I'm not a big fan of,
right.
or you know, moral relativism, you know, that emerges as a result of certain ideologies that are present in some of the more organized churches.
Yeah.
But I definitely see the utility in it. In fact, I consider myself to be, or I strive to be, I should say I strive to be, not that I consider myself to be, I strive to be a community celebrant.
Yeah.
You know, someone who's, you know, I was trying to develop a practice as a coach for a minute, but then I started to think of it more of like, I just have that toolbox to be able to talk with people if they need someone to talk to.
You're a community accelerant.
And a community accelerant.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I want to move towards the designation of like being the person that someone in the secular rock and roll world can talk to about their existential quandaries and and deeper philosophical ideas and things like that. That's one thing I love doing with this podcast is you get to sit down and you know, in 3 hours. You know, I'm not doing an interview like, you know, so I'm sitting here with Aaron Saye here from Seventh Circle Music Collective. You know, it's not like in 15 minutes you need to give me your elevator pitch for me to tell a story.
Yeah.
Like we can sit down here and we can have a conversation.
Yeah.
And we can go down some rabbit holes and we can take some turns and the conversation will yield things once we're getting past the sound bites and the rehearsed mission statements and things like that. Right. And I compare that a lot to the role that the preacher or the pastor or the reverend or whoever it is has in a certain community.
Sure. Yeah.
You know, they're almost the therapist to the community rather than being like a clinical psychologist or something like that. You know. So yeah,
I definitely feel that way at Seventh Circle too.
Oh yeah,
because,
I mean based upon what you've told me.
I mean, it was funny. There was one
That's
night.
why I said it's like a secular youth group.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah, exactly. Like there was, just to bring it back all around to Seventh Circle now, it was just so funny. There was one night where
a full Seventh Circle.
Hey, well, would you look at that? Yeah, there was one night where there's this kid that has been coming around for like a year and a half at this point, and like we become really good friends. He's become a really regular volunteer, and you know, I've just like sat with him after shows and like listened to him talk about his life shit for hours on end, you know, over the course of this last year and a half. And at one point we were just kind of there either before a show or during a show or after a show or something, and we were just kind of sitting up front talking, and another one of our good friends walks in and he's just like talking about how like something is going on in his life, and the other kid goes, well, hey, have you ever had like an Aaron Saye therapy session? Because they're really nice. And I was just like, oh, like I never realized that anybody had like quantified it in that much of a little box. But it was really neat that he was just like, yeah, fucking talk to Aaron about this at some point. Like, dude, I can leave the room.
So
you
little.
Know?
People need so little, man.
Exactly. I mean, all it takes, honestly, like there's one friend of mine that I've had so many in-depth conversations with, and most of what that conversation is me just sitting there and listening. And with this one person in particular, he's like my closest friend right now. And I just sat there one night for like 4 hours and he just listened. And he worked out everything that he was going through just by being able to vocalize it and bounce it off somebody that was only just sitting there and nodding and smiling and saying yes.
Well, you can have something eating you alive.
Yeah.
And if you just talk to someone who listens to you and mirrors it back to you without judgment,
right,
and lets you know that you're okay, and doesn't recoil in horror or scream in your face or run out of the room. And you can see people, you can see it written on their faces where they are just begging for someone to ask them how they're doing.
Yeah.
You know, they're just like, they just want to scream and they want somebody to check in on them.
Yeah.
A good listener is a good friend.
Yeah.
You know,
100%.
without our homies, we're just crying from the cradle to the grave.
Right.
Yep. But and then trying to conceal that crying, you know what I mean? Trying to conceal that from people.
Right,
and
because you're supposed to be tough and you're supposed to be a man and you're supposed to, like, that's such a fucking toxic way to think.
Oh, yeah.
Well, and another thing that I love about doing this is it has helped me to destigmatize, like have this conversation where I'm destigmatizing my own unease and my own anxiety and my own grief and my own depression and my own feelings of inferiority, and put it out there and have a conversation with someone and put it out into the world and get it out into the sunlight. And most of the response that I've gotten, in fact, if we take a break, I want to go grab this. We got a letter that I sent to you.
Yeah, that was
actually
awesome.
Do you have the letter on your phone?
I can.
Yeah. I want to show you this. This is super rewarding.
Yeah, sure.
But I like having the opportunity to like have those conversations with real people. And also, I don't know about you, but part of how my anxiety manifests is I start to get paranoid. And I start to think that people dislike me in some way. You know what I mean? I'll start to get ideas in my head, like a narrative in my head. I don't know if you encounter that at all.
Yeah.
But what happens is when I bring people into this room and I sit and have a conversation with them, I start to realize more and more how people are just off living their own lives.
Yeah.
And it really has nothing to do with me.
Yep.
So sitting down with a different person every week and seeing how their life has been going, seeing what they're up to, seeing the type of person they are, like getting this opportunity to catch up with them it's like, no, it's not just a big, cyber sphere of invisible enemies and conspirators.
Right.
It's a bunch of people with lives, and their avatars are broadcast on these platforms for everyone to see, and it like pulls people out of that realm and sits them down and goes like, let's have a face-to-face interaction as human beings.
Right.
And I think that's so important, and it has been tremendously beneficial for my mental health.
Yeah.
And tremendously beneficial for my relationships with the people who have come into the room.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure it has.
And
I mean that's the incredible thing about it too, is that I feel like with everything being so digital these days, and so there's so much social media and text-based communication, there's so much less face-to-face conversation like this happening, as far as like relative to how much conversation is happening one way or the other. We've never done this, but you and I have known each other for over a decade.
Right.
And this is
any
the most
conversation that we've had has been very, very
surface
loose.
and quick. Yeah.
Surface and quick. The entire time.
Absolutely, yeah.
Like,
it's always just been like, oh, yeah, you're in a band. I've seen your band a bunch of times. You're cool.
Hey, it's good to see you.
Yeah.
Now we recognize each other and we know each other by name.
Right.
Now we're Facebook friends, so we can acknowledge each other out in public.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And it's just, and I feel like so much of that dynamic shift that's happened in the last 10 to 15 years with the advent of social media becoming the way that people are so much more overwhelmingly communicating instead of face-to-face has changed so much about how we process that type of anxiety and that type of paranoia. And I mean, like over the course of time, for sure, like even recently, I continue to have to like check myself with things like that, because I'll be like, oh, I haven't heard from that person in a while. I texted them and they never texted me back. I wonder if I did something wrong. I wonder if they don't like me anymore, if they don't want to hang out anymore, like what the fuck ever it might be. And then I just have to step back and check myself and go, no, they're off doing whatever they're doing.
Why didn't this person reply to my email?
Yeah, exactly. It's like they're probably busy enough that they saw it and they thought, okay, I want to take the time to reply to that when I have the time to have an actual conversation because I care about this person. That time is not right now because I'm busy living and surviving and doing whatever I'm doing.
Or I forgot.
Or that, because it's so, we're so bombarded with notifications in the digital realm every day, all day.
Or even if there is an emotional, personal component to it, I've almost invariably found that on the rare occasion that happens, it's like, I just didn't know what to say.
Sure, so you didn't say anything.
I didn't know how to deal with it, or I was scared.
Yeah.
Or it was very uncomfortable, and I'm sorry, I'm human.
Right.
If we had been in the same room together, it would have been a different story.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where a lot of problems are stemming from these days, too, is with communication of the younger generation. There's so much...
people firing volleys from a distance.
Yeah, exactly. There's so much like keyboard warriorship going on where people are just spouting their opinions out into the ether on Facebook, and then people are commenting back and they're having an argument. But it's like if you two are in the same room having the exact same conversation with the exact same words, the tone
would be completely different.
And the outcome would be different because you are interacting with each other. You're seeing that you're both human, and you can calm down and understand that it's okay to have different viewpoints from each other and still be friends.
And almost no one that you meet on the internet is the same in real life.
God, no. Nope, never.
Almost every time I have met someone online first, they have been a completely different human being when I met them in person.
Because you concoct this idea in your head of what they are based on the
text, imagined tone of their text.
Exactly.
And even before social media communication became such a big thing, but when text was pretty prolific, or pervasive rather, is if you got in a fight with someone via text, I have sent and been sent the most angry things that, like, we send things into space. You know what I mean? We take our anger and we shoot it into space.
Yeah.
And we don't have to be responsible for the human being that's on the other side.
Right.
When
you're in a room with a person, you absolutely have to be responsible for that. And so that makes the communication more thorough.
I had a friend who would get drunk and he would get angry and he would send his anger out, and And then, he kind of looked at it as like, oh, I was blowing off steam, or, we just had a little thing. But there was one time after a thing like that where I went to where he was and went to him and I went, this is the human being on the other end of this communication. I was like, you are hurting me with what you're saying. What you were saying is unfair.
Yeah.
And if you want to have a conversation, we need to have a conversation about it right here. And the tone of the conversation completely changes when you do that.
Yep.
Because you're looking at a human being sitting in front of you.
Yeah.
And we have mirror neurons.
Yeah.
Which are designed to help us empathize with people.
Right.
And unless you're a complete psychopath, which there are psychopaths out there, maybe one day we'll come up with a pill that cures psychopathy.
Wouldn't that be nice?
They're super rare.
Yeah.
They're like 0.0001% of the population.
Right,
super rare.
Right.
But there are psychopaths out there. But for the most part, people have the capacity to be able to see what is written on someone's face and measure their communication based on that.
Right.
But I wanted to share this because this was super rewarding. And go ahead and leave the name off because she might be uncomfortable using the name. But after we did the episode with Ben, a woman who I know as a regular from where I work came in, didn't expect me to be working, but came in with a letter that she had typed for me and gave it to me there. And it just so happened that specific day, Ben was in there eating lunch. So, she gave me the letter, and I went, the dude that was on that episode is right there at that table.
Wow.
So I, ran out to the patio and, interrupted Ben. And I was like, dude, I'm sorry to interrupt, but you got to look at this, dude.
Yeah.
It's a letter about the episode. So will you read the letter, Gordo?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay. Oh, shit, my screen went off. Jesus.
Yay, technology.
Technology.
Every time. Good grief.
Uh-oh. Did your phone die?
Talk amongst yourselves.
Yeah. No, he'll get it going.
Actually, you know what? I need to use the restroom.
Need
while
to
you
use the
make your
restroom?
screen
Let's
work
take a
properly.
break.
Cool.
So-
Hey, how about let's take a quick break. Should we keep the stream going during the break?
We
or
could. Let's just
Wiggins,
put some
can you-
entertaining thing on the
Actually,
table.
Wiggins, can you run something? Is there like a video or something from Seventh Circle of a band that you're particularly proud of?
Oh,
Like
yeah.
Something?
I can't now.
You can't now? Okay.
That's fine. No, whatever. Let's just keep the live stream going. It's okay.
No.
People can look at the empty table for
All
a
right.
second.
Hey, everybody take a pee break at the same time. All right? We'll be right
I
back.
found the letter.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Wait, did he cut? What happened?
No.
I can read it real quick.
Yeah.
I can just read it real quick before we go to break.
Okay, cool.
Okay,
yeah,
yeah,
read the
sure.
letter and we'll
that,
take a
that
break.
way, I won't have to lose it again. Okay. So, Aaron, I just wanted to write you a note and tell you how much I'm enjoying your podcast. It has been awesome to sit and listen to three smart, thoughtful people talk about so many things that I can relate to so hard. A typed letter may be sort of weird, but it sounds like we have both mostly dumped social media, so I have I have very bad penmanship.
I
So
almost
a
put
typed
that.
letter,
I
that's
almost
great.
put that in every typed letter I written.
Oh,
It's
that's
like,
hilarious.
sorry, my handwriting sucks, so I gave you a typed letter.
Yeah.
I just listened to number 71. It's easy to feel like I'm the only person who goes through my specific set of shit, but I am really not. I could relate to so many things, from general shit like going to college without a plan and ending up in a career that isn't what you expected, or how self-reinvention is hard when you are older, or the odd waves of feeling when a close family member dies, or social media can be poison, etc. But then there were the things that were so very specific to the mid-level band experience. Holy shit! The Alaska thoughts.
Yeah.
That part was so helpful for me, particularly today. After last winter when I lost a band and a baby pretty far along in a pregnancy, I had to ditch social media. My feed is all people with babies and gigs, and it was making me sad and jealous. I always beat myself up for feeling at all jealous or insecure when I see similar bands or musicians doing stuff. So it is nice to hear that it is pretty normal to feel insecure and jealous when you see somebody else's curated online stuff. Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's
That's
the folly of
time.
it. You know, I mean,
All the
you're
time.
you're always comparing yourself to to your peers.
Yeah,
You know, you
right.
can't help it. It's nature. It's human nature. But it's so
Like comparing
It's so-
ourselves to others is how we get the motivation to re-enter or move further up the hierarchy.
Sure,
It's
absolutely.
just part of our primitive nature.
But it's so liberating when you can realize, you know what, it's okay that person is having success and I'm not having the exact same kind of success right now. Like, not to interrupt the letter, but I want to expound on that.
Yeah,
so,
yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. You can expound.
Oh, I was just going to say, like,
I
I mean, I kind of go through that, you know, because, like, I'm 34, and I'm seeing almost everybody on social media that I went to high school with is, like, married with a career and a kid, and I'm like, I'm still hanging out in the same punk rock garage that I've been hanging out in for, you know, since 2006. And from, like, their point of view, that kind of looks like it could be a failure, you know? Like, what am I doing? I'm still living like I'm 18, but I'm 34. But then, you know, I continue to have to, like, think, like, no, I'm a complete success at what I chose to do because of what I'm accomplishing and this impact that we're having on people and all this stuff.
And I think it's
It's
important.
all about perspective, you know?
I think it's doing something that you believe in.
Right,
That's the thing that matters.
Yeah,
and it's hard to keep that in perspective.
Sure.
Right. And it's important to destigmatize the common... The commonplace nature of those feelings of not enough.
Right.
You know what I mean? And also destigmatize our own neurosis and insanity. Just as people. It's like our brains are just these giant glands that just produce electrical impulses of thought. Like, we don't have to become identified with them. Like, even the things that, like we talked about, you know, if you bring someone into Seventh Circle and their belief systems may be off base in some way. You know, you're not going to ostracize them and shout them out of the room and put them in exile. You're going to try and help them.
Right.
Because they're really just running the software that's in their brain.
Yeah, all you got to do is reprogram it a little bit.
Right, and I think it's so important
or allow them the access to reprogram it themselves.
Right, give them a software update. Right. And I think it's really important to destigmatize our frailty and our ignorance and our incompetence. You know, it's like, okay, I'm ignorant and incompetent. All right, so are the rest of us.
Yeah.
Let's go out there and try and figure out some things and become better people together.
Yeah.
And the more people we can help become better people, the better off we're all going to be in the long run.
Right.
Yeah, vulnerability is a very common trait amongst the human race.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so is covering it up, which is too bad because that's how people end up depressed and suicidal and all that sort of stuff.
If we hadn't developed those brains that we have, we'd be the most vulnerable species on the planet, man. Like, if we weren't able to just dominate the planet with, like, tyranny of will and, like, cognition, we'd be gone.
Yeah.
We would have gone extinct a long time ago. So continue with the letter.
Okay. Also, the part about not being able to let on if one person isn't coming to practice cracked me up. Had I known that, my band may still be together. But then again, there were certain members who weren't as open to the notion that maybe the reason we weren't where we needed to be was that we just weren't that good and needed to fix some shit. But
Which is something else we talked about in the episode.
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure that we played the bluegrass version of the exact same opening slot at the Bluebird. Technical problems, 50 or so people wanting to quit after hearing the headliner, same. Right. Next time I see you and it's slow at the bar, I'll tell you about a personal experience with a woke as fuck wook online. Based on my experience, I am not surprised these grimy fucks put a hard stop to at wooks doing things. Not to overgeneralize or fail to be sufficiently intersectional, but I feel this lady needed a little bit more self-awareness and a touch less outrage. Anyway, I just wanted to let you know that it was really good, and I will for sure listen again. It was also cool to hear about a subgenre of music I know basically nothing about. I will listen again.
Yeah, this woman is really cool. She's a bluegrass musician who is a regular over at the restaurant.
Yeah.
And really, really very cool person and a lawyer and a parent and just someone that I really enjoy talking with a lot. And after I read that part of the letter about the woke wook thing, she introduced me to Big Game Trophy Wook Hunter Society.
God,
Do you know what that is?
Oh, holy shit. No way. I had no idea such a thing existed.
Apparently it's gotten kind of shitty, but in its infancy, the whole thing was it was just a page where you posted pictures of like a wook that you saw out in the wild, and the thing was like people were basically, would get points for what they called tagging and bagging the wook, which is where they would which they described as like basically whoever wrote the best description of their encounter with this wook, and people were to write it like a David Attenborough
oh my God.
nature
Holy shit.
thing. And the funny thing is, this is my favorite part. one of the bar managers from Fire on the Mountain, this dude Jeter that I work with, who is a sweetheart and one of my favorite people, but he's like, he's a big dude with a beard and giant dreads and loves widespread panic and fish and shit, you know what I mean? And he's an awesome guy.
Kind of Wookiee.
He has been on Big Game Wook Hunters 3 separate times.
Oh my God.
And he's like, God damn it.
I'm on there again.
He's like, why do I keep ending up on this shit? Anyway, to the person that wrote that letter, if you happen to be listening to this episode, you made my fucking day with that. Especially,
You made our day.
Yeah, especially because, and I've mentioned this to you before, Gordo, is like, there have been times when we've been doing this podcast and having certain conversations where we're touching on contentious issues that I'm worried the response is going to be a flood of angry emails. And the truth of the matter is, I don't have the constitution to handle that. I don't have the constitution to handle angry vitriol online or angry emails or things like that. I can handle Yelp reviews for another company, but if someone sends a angry criticism about something that I've worked on, I take it very personally.
Yeah.
Okay, now I have to ask a quick question here.
Right.
Sidebar with the Yelp thing. Do you manage the Yelp comments for just one location or
For both locations.
For both locations.
Yes.
All right, keep an eye out.
Why?
Just keep an eye out.
Oh, no.
Now, my man.
Did you have a negative experience?
No, I did not.
Oh, okay. Oh, no.
This has gotten very cryptic.
To be continued.
Dude,
Oh my God.
actually, real quick before we take a break, I had recently two experiences. One, a group of guys came in, like a group of 6 dudes came in, and they were drunk, and they're watching the NCLS on the TVs because we have TVs up, and they're drunk, and they're just yelling, "Motherfuck this, motherfuck that, motherfuck this, motherfuck that." My coworker went up and was like, "Hey guys, family restaurant, why don't you tone it down a little bit, blah, blah, blah," in a very respectful and polite way. And they got confrontational with him. And they're like, "What the fuck? We're just watching the game. We're just cheering for the game. What's your problem? Blah, blah, blah." And they're like, "Well, you're getting 0 tip." And they stormed. And it ended with a handshake and what I thought was a friendly resolution. But the next day, first thing I wake up to is a 1-star review that is like, "I'm a loyal sports fan, and I was cheering for my team, and this asshole bartender told me to shut up. Well, this place is a bunch of lowlifes, and I'll never come back again.
See, but you can
Shame on this place." He said, "Shame on this place."
see, but you can
Never again.
You can spot that shit a mile away. If you're reading a review, like you can, oh, well, this guy's a fucking asshole.
The type of
You know?
personality that it takes to write a review like that
Yeah.
automatically disqualifies you as a reliable source in my book.
Right.
We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about, we're going to give a shout out to our sponsors, and we're going to talk about, Aaron, Saye, the early days.
Ooh, uh-oh.
When you and I first became acquainted.
Yeah.
So we'll be right back after this. Those of you who are watching the live stream on YouTube, we're going to keep it rolling so that
Well, it's just everybody take a pee break at once, right?
What did Wiggins say? Oh, Wiggins has got to go? Okay, so we're going to cut the live stream now, but we will keep the recorded version going. If you want to hear the rest of this conversation or the beginning of the conversation, subscribe wherever you ever get podcasts. We're on Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and, of course, our website, mfruckus.com. And also make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell here on our channel so you can find out next time we do a live stream. We're going to be doing a lot more of these coming up. But as always, you're going to get the entire conversation if you listen to the audio version of the podcast. So go check that out now. All of you have been on the live stream. Thank you so much for watching. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
Stay tuned.
Sweet.
Well, that works out pretty good.
Yeah.
Like